Noting the hour and the presence of a quorum, I call the Acton-Boxborough Regional School Committee to order. Members of the public who wish to watch the meeting online may use ActonTV's YouTube channel found at the top of the agenda. This meeting is also being recorded and will be posted on ActonTV's website at actontv.org. This evening, we have a few items of particular public interest. I'm grateful that there are residents here this evening who want to participate in this public meeting and perhaps express their opinion on an agenda item or two. If you've never been to a public meeting before, welcome. If you have, then I'm sure you already know these rules of the road, but let's have a quick refresher. You have the right to stand in front of us and share your opinion. You have a right to be in this space and witness our meeting. You have a responsibility to exercise these rights with decorum and civility. My expectation is that we share this room, do this work together, and not forget that we are ultimately neighbors, whole and human, and treat each other that way. As such, I want to be very clear that there will be no booing, heckling, or even applause between comments during our public comment sections. Outbursts like this distract us all and waste precious time. Please refrain from doing so. I will give one warning about this. If we cannot maintain order, as chair, I have the right to close public comment no matter how much time remains. And now that I have set the table, I will open our public comment, our public participation. So, per school committee policy BEDH, members of the public are typically invited to speak for up to 3 minutes regarding items that are not on the agenda. For items that are on the agenda, the public is asked to wait for that item. Speakers must be recognized by the chair before speaking. The committee does not typically respond to comments during public participation. Tonight, 10 minutes maximum will be devoted to public comment. Participants may be limited in time based on the number of individuals. Is there anybody who would like to stand and make a comment not on an agenda item this evening? Good evening, Corinne.
Hi, Corinne Hogsett, the Indian Village. I wanted to make comments about the meeting 2 weeks ago. Peter Light defined empathy for us as the ability to listen really deeply to someone's experience and then believe them, even if it's not yours. I assume he made that statement with the expectation that that would be taken in and that people here would listen to various viewpoints and digest that input before deciding how to vote on any issue. This committee has demonstrated over and over again that you do not listen to the community. You don't really hear or want to hear anyone who disagrees with what you have to say. Most of you are here to push your own political agenda. You come here with your mind made up with no possibility of being influenced by what you may hear. You don't work to find compromise or to incorporate multiple viewpoints into final actions. We've seen this in text messages exchanged between members during the mascot debate 2 years ago. We've seen it in Facebook posts by several current and former members of this committee over the years, and in emails between school committee members and members of the administration. We saw it as recently as 2 weeks ago when one member's first question about the SRO program was when she would have an opportunity to vote to end it before any discussion had even taken place. With this change to limiting public comment to 10 minutes, we're seeing yet again attempts to dismiss input and to further alienate the community. No one comes here to agree with you, so I think it's safe to assume you're trying to silence people like me. I would challenge any one of you to please give me an example. I know you're not going to respond, but to come up with one example of a time that you came here with your mind made up, believing it was made up, and were influenced by what you heard to change your mind. I would like anyone to have any example of that. Thank you.
Is there anyone else who would like to make a public comment before we get started? Very well. Good evening, Mr. Light. Do you have an update for us?
I know we have a long agenda, so I'm going to, we'll send out our update to families tomorrow that we typically do. I do want to just, give one public health reminder. We are seeing a huge uptick in not only flu cases, but we're starting to see an increase in some COVID cases in the schools and also RSV among particularly students. So, we just want to really encourage our families that if someone is sick, stay home. That's really like the best rule of thumb. And I know a lot of our students feel that pressure to come in and, get to class. And I know teachers feel the same way, but I think what we want to do is try and make sure everyone stays healthy. So please, if you're sick, it's okay to stay home. We just want to invite that. So thank you.
So then do you want to tee up our guests and presentations?
Sure. So, I'll let Deb and Jen Truslow come up, and I'll let them introduce the team that they have speaking with you tonight. But as you are aware from a lot of our previous discussions and budget discussions over the last several years, the district has done a lot of work in literacy, particularly in early literacy, to think about, shifting more into, really teaching based on the science of reading that we've come to better understand in education over the last decade or two. And so we wanted to come back with a presentation tonight, not only talking about what we've done in terms of literacy, but also start talking a little bit about the student outcomes that we're seeing and how we're hoping to shift those outcomes over time. And so I will continue vamping until Deb, I was a musician and the term is vamp. If you're a musician, you would know what that means. But I will continue to talk until I get the eyes up from Deb and she tells me she's ready to go. But it's actually been an exciting thing, and I have to really just credit our educators in classrooms because, through a pandemic and through all of the changes that are going on as a result of that, to also do all of the heavy lifting to shift literacy practices is a lot of work. And so just really credit to the educators who are doing this work on the front lines. There's been a lot of change over the last few years. This has been a really important one and continues to be important. So with that, I'm going to introduce Deb Bookis, who will talk until the slides are ready. Yeah.
Sure, go ahead. That's just having. Perfect, thank you. All right.
Good.
All right, so this is a slide that you've seen before. It's our district strategy. But this time I want to orient you to the right side in the lower portion of the diagram where it says evidence-based screening and assessment, multi-tiered systems of support, and literacy outcomes, all of which you're going to hear about this evening. So this presentation is divided into 5 different but very connected topics that are listed on the left side. The presenters on the right side will introduce themselves to you before they speak. We will pause after each section so that you can ask us some questions. I do want to point out that Sharon Ryan couldn't be with us tonight, and I also want to acknowledge the tremendous amount of contributions that she's made to our work and to this presentation. All right, so first our district goals and outcomes. Our district goal number 2 is to increase the number of students on a pathway to proficiency in literacy and mathematics through implementation of MTSS, a multi-tiered system of support. Our outcome is to increase the number of students meeting their stretch goals with particular emphasis on students performing 1 or more grade levels below benchmark on their baseline or fall assessment. The fall baseline assessment for us is iReady. So the first thing Christy and I want to do is we want to share with you the use of universal screening and progress monitoring by how the district uses it and then how schools and classroom educators use it. So at the district level, we can use the data to remove barriers that we identify for MTSS implementation and also for student learning. We can also use the data to provide needed resources such as instructional materials, programs, and professional learning. For progress monitoring, we can use the data to see how well we're serving our students. Are we meeting our goals, and for which students?
At the school level, we use our universal screeners to make sure that we're getting data on every single student. And you'll hear me say many times across this slide as a starting point. So the universal screener is our starting point and tells us the places where we want to drill down into the data. We use it to start discussions about instructional grouping, whether a student needs universal instruction or targeted instruction or intensive instruction. We use it to start a discussion about the needs in those instructional areas and what we might want to look at in the vertical alignment of our curriculum across the school. Again, we use that as a starting point and then look at other data points. We, again, use it to progress monitor, and the most important part at McCarthy Town and across all 6 elementary schools is using this data to celebrate the positive strengths that we see in our students first, and then look at what might be some gaps that we want to start to target with our instruction. We also use it for a progress monitoring tool for teacher teams to be able to look at how their instruction has impacted students positively or something we want to keep looking at.
Go back just for a second for that other slide. So we also want to mention that we use DIBELS for grades K through 3 and for upper grades if necessary. We also use that as a universal screener for very specific foundational literacy skills like phonemic awareness, oral reading fluency, rapid automatized naming, and all of these skills are aligned to the new dyslexia regulations. So we also want you to know that we're using that as a universal screener. Thanks, the next slide. So this slide represents the aggregate results for the fall iReady reading assessment for grades 1 through 8. You can see that 43% of our students scored at mid or above range level, 21% scored at early on grade level, 24% at grade 1 grade below, 6% at 2 grades below, and 6% at 3 or more grades below. It's important to note with iReady's 5-scale rating that students who are 1 grade below on the first diagnostic window, that's in the fall, are performing consistently with students who have just begun their school year, so right at the beginning of September. If this were January, it would be a different interpretation. So noted strengths on this slide are in phonemic awareness, phonics, and high-frequency words. This is, though, the second year that our challenges are in vocabulary and comprehension. The next slide shows the 24%, or the 694 students who scored 1 grade below by grade level. Students, again, who scored the 1 grade level below in the fall are performing consistently with students who've just begun their academic year. They benefit from continued on-grade level instruction, or as we're calling effective Tier 1 core instruction. And you're going to hear much more about Tier 1 or core instruction throughout this presentation. Please know that all students are again assessed in January, so we can monitor that progress with the iReady tool. Next one, thanks. 377 students, or 13% of our students assessed, scored 2, 3, or more grade levels below. So if you take a look at this example, for example, in 5th grade, we had 41 students who scored 2 grade levels below, or approximately 1.4% of all the students assessed, 2,894. 19 students at grade 5 scored 3 or more grade levels below, or 0.7%. And these are the students for whom we need to close their growth goal as fast as possible so that we can shrink the amount of time for their also accessing grade level content and able to do so. So if we take a deeper dive now into some of the data, of the 377 students assessed that were 2, 3, or more grade levels below, 88 or 23% of the students are multilingual. If we move across in that row to the next chart, there are 178 multilingual students who were assessed, so of the subgroup population. 88 of them represents 49% of the subgroup population. Again, if we look at special education in that row, of the 377 students assessed that were 2, 3, or more grade levels below, 189, or approximately 50%, were 2 or 3 more grade levels below. Of the total population of special education students, 439 in the subgroup, 189 represents 43%. Okay. So this data really underscores why we also need to continue our anti-bias work, our culturally responsive work, and to reflect on and identify and remove barriers to learning. I'm going to switch over to MCAS. So the purpose of MCAS is accountability, but it really can be used for us to look at the big picture, to see about our standard alignment as well as our curricular alignment. Below on the slide is DESI's guidance on how to use MCAS this year. So they strongly encouraged us to use the results for improvement at the local level and to be cautious when making comparisons between districts and even across schools within the same district. And this is mostly because the last 2.5 years really have not been normal, so the results are going to be very different. We know access for many students was disrupted, some more so than others. And they really encouraged us to find the bright spots, that's what they called it, and to really look to see where the recovery has begun and to see where we might be trending in a more positive direction. They encouraged us to connect it to ongoing initiatives, which is what we're doing, connecting it to our goals, but really to hold at the very center that the big picture is the social emotional well-being of our students, their sense of belonging, their sense of connectedness, and to really keep that at the center of all of our work. Thanks. The next slide. This is a slide really just to take a brief note and to note for you that accountability, due to the interruptions and the modifications the last several years, that there is no accountability this year, and those determinations will resume again in 2023, so next year. Okay. This slide and the next one were presented by the Associate Commissioner, Rob Curtin, to district leaders, along with state-level information and analysis. So the 2022 school year was the first full MCAS administration for grades 3 through 8 since 2019. So to put that into perspective, our grade 10 students in 2022 had not taken an MCAS since grade 7. Next slide. This slide shows the impact of COVID at the state level. So the state showed some variable losses across grades 3 through 7, while grade 8 started to show some signs of recovery in 2022, and grade 7 started to move in a more positive direction. So if you're looking at the change column, meeting and exceeding 21, 22, which is the second from the right, you'll see down below that grade 8 across went from -11 decrease in proficiency to a +1. Grade 7 was -5 in 2019-21 to -2. So again, trending in a more positive direction. This next slide shows our data in the same way. So the signs of recovery for us in grade 6, and then we had some trending in the right direction in all of our other grades, except in grades 4 and 5. Grade 10 was a 1-year decrease of 2%, and that was just for that 1 year. So the total impact for us was about 11% decrease in grades 3 through 8, meeting expectations since 2019. So to read this chart, in 2019, you can see the meeting and exceeding expectations for grade 3. In 2021 is the second column, the blue column. You'll see that 2020 is skipped because there was no MCAS that year. And then 2022, the green column. The change in meeting and exceeding, if we're reading it across -10, from 79% proficiency to 69 proficiency, and then the change from 21 to 22 was -1. So the total cumulative change from 19 to 22 was -11. So you can see in 4th and 5th grade, we're not trending in the right direction. But in all the other grades, we started to trend in a more positive direction. If we start looking at by cohort style, the ovals will show you the cohorts. So third graders and seventh graders, which are represented by the red and the black ovals. In 2019, after some decline in 2021, started to show some gains in 2022. Our fourth graders in 2019, represented by the green ovals, showed some slight gains in 2021 and then declined in 2022. Our fifth graders were pretty consistent all 3 years. They're the yellow ovals. And our sixth graders in 2019 showed some decline for both years. So they're the purple ovals. So it's just another way of looking at the data across that period of time. So I'm going to hand this to Jen, and she's going to talk about the student growth percentile.
Yeah, so this slide shows the state's definition of student growth percentile. It measures the state measures achievement over time. It uses a cohort model to compare students across the state who earned similar scores on the previous year's MCAS. It's calculated in grades 4 through 8 and in grade 10 for ELA and mathematics. In 2021, it should be noted that the state used a different calculation that cannot be compared to this year's or the 2022 scores. And then that shows you how they define the ranges. I'm gonna cough. Excuse me. This indicates the growth and how it's defined in the year 2022. And again, it should be noted that it cannot be compared to 21 because in 2021, it was not the same testing modality in terms of the number of students who were participating in both the full assessments. As you can see, this slide shows our ELA scores for our 3rd through 8th graders. Of note is our students with disabilities who showed typical growth but lower achievement as compared to all students in the district. There's a similar pattern for our Hispanic Latino students. We also can see on this slide that there is a significant increase in our number of multi-language learners from 102 to 288. Also, our EL students showed good achievement and typical growth. This next slide shows our ELA by subgroup in grade 10. Students with disabilities showed high growth, but still did not achieve at the level of all students in our district. Our number of EL students continues to increase, and their achievement was good. Our multiracial students showed a decrease in meeting and exceeding expectations. So what does this all mean? We've not had this data before, so we see this as an opportunity. We also see that this shows some indicators of the impact of COVID, where providing services to students was a challenge. Many of all of our students need in-person learning, and remote and teaching via screens was very difficult to meet their needs. So we're seeing some of the gaps in their learning now. So what are we doing? We're asking lots of questions. We're looking at schedules as to looking at who is providing services, where are services happening? Are they happening in the classroom? Are students being pulled out of the classroom? When are services happening? We are looking at making sure that our students are not missing core instruction. More special education teachers are getting trained in Wilson to support students, and we're looking at the curriculum and materials that were being used to support our reading instruction.
Right. So we did an item analysis of both iReady and MCAS. And at the district level, we can really use these analyses to reflect on how our curriculum and other resources support or don't support the teaching and learning of reading. So for 2 years, we've seen that our students have struggled with both vocabulary and comprehension on both iReady and MCAS, though I will point out that our students did perform a whole lot better on vocabulary on the MCAS in 2022 than they have in previous years, so that's a bright spot for us. These are the grades, though, that performed below 79% in that standard or that cluster. So taken together, the 2 years of this data and the lack of an evidence-based literacy program to complement the foundational skills program we already have in place really does compel us to focus on choosing a program that supports teaching vocabulary, comprehension, and background knowledge. And you're going to learn in later slides our process to select that program. Now Jen's going to talk a little bit about dyslexia. Oh, I'm going to stop for questions. I'm going to stop there first for questions.
There. I have young kids, so I know how iReady works, and it seems like a great tool. My question is, how much time is spent preparing for MCAS every year?
I would like to just say all year, every day, we prepare for MCAS. We don't do a lot of explicit, like, this is MCAS practice, but we do a lot of analyzing what the questions are and what we're seeing in the results, and then thinking about, and we'll talk more about this when we talk about data meetings, but thinking about what are the skills that we need to develop with students.
I just have a quick one on the 2 slides that were showing subgroups. At the top of the list was an abbreviation ED. Was that economically disadvantaged students? Great, thank you.
As you know, the state of Massachusetts passed legislation in 2019 requiring districts to address the need for early identification of reading difficulties. Dyslexia guidelines were released in January of 2020 to provide direction and support for district staff at all levels and parents to ensure that students with dyslexia and other learning disabilities receive the education they're entitled to, starting with early identification and continued access to evidence-based instruction. The guidelines provided screening guidelines for all students, including students demonstrating 1 or more potential signs of a learning disability, but not limited to dyslexia. The guidelines provided a framework of intervention for students at risk of dyslexia and other learning difficulties that is timely and responsive, and a comprehensive resource of evidence-based practices aimed at all educators to support students at risk of dyslexia and those identified as having dyslexia. In September 2022, the Board of Elementary and Secondary Education adopted an amendment to the regulations that requires all elementary schools to assess each student's reading abilities and early literacy skills at least twice per year, from kindergarten to at least grade 3. This amendment also requires prompt notification of families and guardians about the district's plans to support students who are significantly behind relevant benchmarks. In response, Acton-Boxborough has shifted its approach from reactive to proactive stance, thus preempting the waiting to fail approach of doing only interventions once a student has struggled without support over a period of time. We have early literacy screeners in place and questions about family history incorporated into our kindergarten screening materials. Elementary schools are implementing MTSS, which you'll be hearing about, with progress monitoring. We have our instructional leadership teams and our instructional support teams collecting data and meeting regularly to review and implement timely and responsive interventions for students based on the data. The district has purchased evidence-based literacy materials for all of our classrooms. We've also created a reading task force made up of teachers, coaches, and specialists who are meeting and investigating potential core programs for implementation at the elementary level. In addition, the school will complete a comprehensive evaluation to determine the presence of a disability as needed. We do anticipate additional guidance from the state as to the implementation of the amendment, which is required to start at the beginning of the 2023-24 school year.
So we'll stop for questions on dyslexia.
My name is Amanda Bailey. I'm one of the co-chairs of the Special Education Parent Advisory Council. I'm speaking on this issue in that capacity. We love the proactive early literacy, the identification, intervention early. We have a bubble of students outside of that 3rd grade window who were not identified early, who have not received that intensive intervention at that early age. We have a bubble of students who are still struggling to read 4th, 5th, 6th, and beyond. And we'd like a plan to address that, please, in addition to all of the work that's done in the early literacy. The additional thing is that there's this emphasis on social emotional learning. There is a deep social emotional cost to not being able to read. Thank you.
Okay, a couple other folks come up. We're going to talk a little bit now about the literacy program and our efforts to find one for our district.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Dora Sanchez. I'm the 3-6 ELA and Social Studies Curriculum Coordinator, and I will be presenting this part along with my colleagues.
Hi, I'm Stacy Valley. I'm the literacy coach at the Boardwalk campus for Douglas and Gates.
And hi, everyone. I'm Carrie Cusick. I'm a reading specialist at Blanchard Memorial School.
So as mentioned in a previous slide by Deb, our data and the need for an evidence-based literacy program to complement our foundational skills program compels us to focus on choosing a core program. The following slides highlight the work we have been doing to put evidence-based practices at the forefront. Through our work with educators from various roles and across all 6 elementary schools, we have developed this literacy vision statement. Strong literacy skills are essential for developing responsible, self-motivated, engaged learners who demonstrate a love of reading. These skills are necessary for understanding, evaluating, and disseminating complex thoughts and ideas. Equity and accessibility are crucial for our students to be successful in a diverse global society and to be lifelong communicators. To increase student reading and engagement, direct instruction, differentiation, and access to complex and engaging texts with rich vocabulary are at the core of our teaching. Through high-quality, evidence-based, inclusive, culturally responsive instruction, highly diverse texts, digital media, writing, and discussions, students will develop the necessary comprehension, active listening, and discussion skills to become lifelong readers and learners empowered to share their voices to succeed as informed and productive citizens.
In linking to the vision statement that we've created as a team of educators, we've also looked at the components of the core literacy block based on DESE's guidelines. So when we think of the core literacy block, we really think of 3 components: foundational skills, engaging with complex text, and writing. And we think of foundational skills to be systematic instruction with active practice. So in our primary grades, this looks like looking at print concepts, letter-sound correspondence, phonological awareness, phonics and decoding, and fluency and sight recognition, and how we can access that through our educators is through our high-quality instructional materials. We have Haggerty for grades K to 1 in our elementary schools for phonological awareness, Foundations for K to 3 for our phonics program for decoding and encoding, decodable texts, which many educators love, as well as students. So with those texts, we have ones such as geodes, flyleaf. The geodes go very well with our foundations program, so kids see those connections. And then our word study and advanced phonics, that's pending with our core program review as we move on up the grades for grades 4 and up. And then with our engagement with complex text, we really want kids to be lifelong readers. So these texts that we're choosing, really, what does it consist of? We want them to have a background building of knowledge and vocabulary, being able to understand what they read, and being able to respond to text, both fiction and nonfiction. And what does that look like in our schools? We've actually partnered with Hill for Literacy for our core program review with our reading task force. And last but not least, for writing, again, the foundational skills in writing are really extremely systematic. So what does it consist of in the classroom? Sentence structure and conventions, the craft of the writing, and just the writing process. And we're really evaluating the writing component as part of our core reading process, but we are also integrating SRSD, which stands for Self-Regulated Strategy Development, with our partnership with Leslie Laude. Now, one big piece of all of this is that oral language comprises all of those components of the core literacy block, so we're speaking, listening, actively engaging through text.
I'm going to frame our work with the Hill for Literacy and take you through the timeline that we've been going through and will continue through choosing the core program, the reading program. So last spring, the spring of 2022, we sent a request to all educators to see if they would like to be part of the task force. We have an overwhelmingly large amount of staff that wanted to be a part of it. However, we had to choose only 23 to be a part of the initial review. So those 23 educators span all 6 schools. They represent all different roles: administration, coaches, reading specialists, curriculum coordinators, classroom teachers, special educators, English language developmental teachers, and various service providers. In October of this year, we began the preliminary meetings. During the meeting, we first looked at the literacy vision that Dora just shared with us. And then we looked at the 5 programs that were vetted by the curriculum coordinators and that were highly ranked on Ed Reports and Curate. In the beginning of December, the coaches, myself, Maren Gulliver, Ann Joyce, Deb, Dora, Kerry, and Michael Voto, the assistant principal at Blanchard, went to schools in Massachusetts that were using these curriculums. We were able to speak with teachers, see the programs in action, speak with their literacy administration teams, and come back and share our findings with the task force. The information were shared with the task force and with the school principals. After that time, the task force had time to review and make notes and listen, and then we sent a ranking survey to them. So that they went from 5 programs and ranked them to find our top 2. As of today, those 2 top programs have been selected. The staff then, the rest of the staff, were then invited to participate in the second piece of the review. And we have over 100 educators in the district that want to be a part of this review process. So we're really excited about that. Moving forward, the next few parts of the timeline are talking from January to March. We're looking at the 2 programs. There's going to be 2 rounds of this evaluation tool that we use. The tool was built by Hill for Literacy, who are guiding us through this process. It's a comprehensive checklist that has important research-based elements of a reading program, such as fluency, culturally responsive and sustaining ed, vocabulary, professional development, motivation and engagement, listening and speaking, instructional design, comprehension, assessment, writing, and advanced phonics. The review will take place. They will rank each component of the curriculum from a 0 to a 3. A 0 means they didn't find any evidence. A 1 is that it's low quality. A 2 is average quality, and a 3 is high quality. The final decision, including the selection and purchase of the program, will occur in April of this year. And that will be based on the information gathered from the review tools and from recommendations from the reading task force. Moving forward in the school year 23-24, we will launch the program and the implementation, and we'll have continuously ongoing feedback from implementation, monitoring how the program is going, and providing professional learning for all staff.
And as we're talking about curriculum and some of the changes, I wanted to also mention some of the things that are happening at the junior high and the high school. So the junior high, they've really been working on curriculum mapping to create some vertical alignment between the grades. They're also including a lot more prompt writing practice for students. They have created some text sets so that students can write across text to make comparisons and connections. And there has been inclusion of the ELA fundamentals into grade level classes so that our students are more ready for the expectations on the MCAS for reading and writing. For grades 9 through 12, they've adjusted the scope and sequence, so students are practicing with multi-text writing, rhetorical analysis, and nonfiction earlier in the year before MCAS is given. They've also created single-point rubrics, which is where you take a rubric and you just put the proficient column in the center of the page, and you're giving feedback to students on either end of something they need to work on or something that they're doing really well, along with shorter writing assignments. And so they're getting that actionable feedback on a more continual and shorter basis so they can improve their writing. Right, so before we go on to MTSS implementation, do you have any questions about some of the curricular work that's happening?
So given the data that we've seen on our multilingual students, I would just like just a couple more connections between all of that review process that we just saw, which yay, and how that's going to touch the data that we just saw. Can you tell us a little bit about how this work is going to move the needle for some of our cohorts, please?
So I think one of the things that we need to be thinking about is when Jen was talking about the scheduling first, about students having access to that core curriculum and that being really important. The core curriculum itself, the ones that we were looking at, have MTSS built into it. So we also will have sort of the different ways that we can be working with students based on some of the assessments. It also has multilingual components, so we are looking to see some of the strategies that are good for some of our multilingual students are also good for all students, such as using sentence frames, using think alouds, using write arounds. So all those different strategies are also, and we're looking for those practices to be built into the program, so it doesn't look like it's an add-on or something extra, that it's built right into that core curriculum. So those are a few ways. I don't know if anybody else wants to. Okay, Carrie?
I think, too, as well, just the fact that all of the programs that we're looking at are geared in structured literacy, so we're hitting on so much of phonics and phonemic awareness and all of that to make the structure cohesive and so explicit across all of our grade levels moving forward, too. So I think that's a large hope in the role that we share.
And if I can just, Deb, would you mind just bringing back the original iReady slide that broke it down by strand? Right here. So I used to be able to read that far, not anymore. But behind me, when you start to look at the actual strands and domains of how our students are performing, you can see right now we have some relative strengths in phonological awareness, phonics, high-frequency words. But when you get into vocabulary and comprehension skills, that's where we're seeing our students struggle to be at grade level at a higher rate. And so the work that's being done now in the curriculum study is really focused in on those, high need areas that we're seeing. It doesn't mean that we're still not going to say those top 3 areas are high priority. We know they're critical foundation reading skills. However, we also need to expand our programming to make sure we're addressing some of the areas that we don't have that same relative strength.
Can I just follow up one more time on that? It might be important to note that we're not changing what we're doing. We're keeping Hegarty and we're keeping foundations. What we're looking at are programs that complement that and bring in those other 3 areas so that we can put the whole thing together. All right, so now we're going to move on to the and while we get settled, I just want to share that we're in year 1 at the district level for implementation across the district. This is a multi-year implementation process. So we're 4 months in, so we're going to give you a glimpse of what 4 months in looks like. Okay. And Anne-Marie's going to introduce herself first.
Hi, I'm Anne-Marie Phelan. I'm a second grade teacher at Douglas at the Boardwalk campus.
So we wanted to start just by giving you a brief overview. We know at this point you've had a lot of education around MTSS, but to frame the rest of what we're going to say, we wanted to give you a brief overview. So as we said, it starts with universal screening and progress monitoring tools, and then groups of staff go through a problem-solving process to identify problems, analyze problems. I also will just add, celebrate successes, plan interventions, and then monitor and evaluate those plans and continue to sort of look at the data and increase the intensity and the focus of each intervention set for each group of students, which I think links to your question, Kyra. This process helps us look at that data and link the intervention to make sure we're addressing those subgroups. We can go to the next slide.
So there's many highlights so far of the implementation. All of the elementary schools now have a shared vision and are making shifts towards a robust MTSS model. The educators are making progress in the various tiers of instruction. They're beginning to shift their own practice and to look at data to make instructional decisions. All of the elementary schools are holding regular data meetings at the grade level, but also at the district, building, and classroom levels. This provides opportunities to see where the gaps in the learning are, as well as what targeted skills are needed for intervention. But it also provides opportunity for educators to think about how to adjust their universal instruction to meet the needs of all students, and provides opportunities to learn about extension activities for students that are achieving at or above grade level. Data-driven practices support equity and access for all students.
And as with any new venture, there may be challenges as well. So some that we're finding are schedule and shared staff. We have three literacy coaches in our district, but they're shared often with 2 buildings. Balancing all the demands of time and the resources that we have. And MTSS/Flex requires ongoing differentiated professional learning for all educators in data literacy, like what do these numbers really mean, content, instructional practices, and of course, social emotional learning.
So we wanted to give you a couple examples of what this looks like at each school. The picture here shows a group of teachers looking at the data with the literacy coach. We often also have admin at the table and our school counselor at the table to make sure we're weaving in the social emotional impacts with the academics. So we follow the same process that we reviewed at the beginning. We looked at iReady data. We noticed strengths in phonics and high frequency words. We also noticed some weaknesses in that 4th grade vocabulary and reading informational text. We then introduced a new assessment for our 4th grade team that Ann Joyce, our amazing literacy coach, brought to that team. They drilled down into the data and found exactly what some of the targeted skills within there are for each group. Put in place an intervention from bringing words to life for 6 weeks. And then if you go to the next slide, looked at some post data for our next data meeting and the progress monitoring meeting. And you can see that there was some growth, but there was also some students still in that category of needing more targeted instruction. So we then moved into looking at tier 2 interventions. And that's the process in this first year that we're finding in a lot of our grade levels, is looking at first universal supports around tier 1, and then in the 6-week cycle, looking at a smaller group that still needs more instruction in a skill and adjusting that instruction, and then moving on and taking data in the next 6 weeks to see how that's going. The most important thing, if you flip back a slide, is the collective efficacy. This process used to be something that was done by a classroom teacher with the support of a special educator or an EL teacher, but the individual classroom teacher would have to reach out to those resources and coordinate themselves. We now have a structural process where the collective efficacy of the whole team is impacting every student. And I think that's really the power of this process at a school level.
So now I'm going to share with you an example at Blanchard for for third grade. So just consistent with everyone else, Dibbles has been our screener, and it was administered in September to all students, actually K to 3 at Blanchard, and then we dibbled actually older students as well. What we found was we wanted to really look at oral reading fluency. And when you get a score on Dibbles, you get a fluency score for words per minute, but also an accuracy score. So we wanted to look at the accuracy. How accurate are our readers? Trying to figure out what they're really doing when they're reading connected text. So we found that 37% of our third graders scored in the at-risk or some risk category for this measure. So in October, our flex groups did begin, and we implemented a walk to learn model. So what we did was we used those providers that were available during our flex block of third grade, myself as a reading specialist, classroom teachers, multilingual teachers, our reading assistant and classroom assistants, and we were able to sort of figure out what needs our students had to make sure that it was most effective for their time. So our groups looked like structured literacy that was happening in my room, as well as classroom teachers, fluency models, comprehension, both literal and inferential. So really differentiated based on this data. And then we were able to progress monitor. So that's another dipstick in this process of a Dibbles measure to see how is our instruction working? Is what we're doing effective for our students in front of us? So we were able to shift some movements among students that had made progress to other needs that they may have had that arose in the classroom based on Tier 1 instruction through foundations, as well as other things in our comprehension strategies. So we're meeting again right after the new year to see, again, this process again. But if you go to the next slide, you'll sort of see just some graphs. We have a process called our MCAS data system that we can see these graphs and how our progress is working for progress monitoring data. So I just gave 3 snippets of students, but if you see that dotted line, you'll see that for their accuracy, they're progressing either on or above that line for their reading fluency accuracy, which is a joyous celebration. And the next slide just really shows kids in action. You know, students are the center of all of this and all of our work. So we are having that engagement. It's meaningful text interactions. It's so driven by students in front of us and what they need. And that's where their literacy skills really shine and come alive.
So our next example that we're sharing is at Douglas in second grade. So just like all the other schools, we use Dibbles as our screening tool to look at kids' foundational skills and what targeted instructions they might need. And then we met with our coaches and reading specialists and looked at how we can better support those students. Yes, next.
So here is just a snippet of data. So we're looking at the Dibbles data for second grade. BOY is not boy, it's beginning of the year data. And so you can see, we noticed with the second grade team that 30 to 32% of students were in the at-risk or the red, or some risk, which is the yellow, when it came to letter sound knowledge and decoding. Decoding is just the ability to read a word with familiar phonics patterns. And so 9 of those students in second grade were in the at-risk for the letter sounds, and 10 of them were at risk for decoding.
So after we gathered this data, we met as a team where reading specialists, educators, coaches met, and we looked at all the data and we said, okay, what skill deficits do these students have? What more interventions do they need? And that's where coaches really provided us evidence-based activities that we could do with those students to better their learning. And just to highlight, these are flexible groups. When we say we're grouping students, they're not in these groups for this 8-week cycle. We are constantly looking at data, and we'll talk more about that.
So this is just a template that we use for our grouping when we're having our data meetings. It's an opportunity for us to look at students and where they fit, and then we can have our conversation. So when the data first comes in, the coaches are doing a preliminary grouping based on data alone. And then when we meet with the team, we're looking all together and making some adjustments, and the team makes the final decisions on the groups, the students, the focus, and the teacher that's going to be providing those focus targeted instruction.
So we also did a walk to learn model where all educators, specialists, coaches were involved in finding out what they were going to be teaching these students in these next couple weeks of intervention. And that's, again, where coaches were very valuable in continuing to touch base with educators. And when I say coaches, I mean Stacy. She is our coach at Douglas. And continuing to provide activities and look at data and continuing to think about what students need. This was a 4-day-a-week, 40-minute cycle with lots of different activities, and it's been getting to know different students as well.
So here's a few pictures. We always want to bring the students back because that's why we do this. So this is some students during Flex, and you can see that they're engaged in reading a text with a teacher. Go to the next one. And this one, they're creating compound word. Oh, no, sorry. This one, they're reading nonsense words for fluency to increase their decoding skills. This one, they're matching words to create compound words. And in this one, they're doing a sequencing of a comprehension retell for Stella Luna. So they're putting the story back in order. And as you can see that during Flex, the students are working collaboratively, they're engaged, and they're giving multiple opportunities for practice and for learning.
So like I said earlier, these groups were flexible, and we progress monitor students every 2 to 3 weeks using either DIBELS or other in-class data that we had. And we met again with coaches, reading specialists, and looked critically at this data and thought about what more do students need? Do they need more intervention? Are they ready to do some more vocabulary work? And we really just looked at some of those focus areas.
And so I come back to the data. In column F and K, those are the beginning of the year scores for those students that we talked about, the 9 and 10. These are a representation of them. And so the red is at risk and the yellow is some risk. The purple columns is the progress monitoring, and purple represents that they've increased their scores. So 100% of our students made progress. And then if you look at column H and M, those are the middle of the year goals. So when we go to assess in January, the goal is for students to get to 68 and to 20. And so you can see that already in letter sounds, 3 of the students are already meeting or exceeding the middle of the year benchmark that we haven't even given them. And 3 are still at some risk and 2 are still at risk. And then for the decoding, 5 of the 8 students are already meeting or exceeding the middle of the year benchmark. 2 are still at some risk and 1 is still at risk. But there are still 3 or 4 more weeks of instruction before we do the middle of the year benchmark. So I'm anticipating seeing more green and more progress.
So thank you for the overview, and you shared some highlights with us, and you also shared some challenges. What can the school committee do to help address those challenges that you laid out?
One of the most important things that you do is the budget. And so just making sure that we have, the resources to purchase the materials, to make sure that we have the funding for professional learning. And I know you look at every line, and I know the challenges, but that's actually one of the most important things that you can do. Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to the last section. Thank you. All right, our last section is on family engagement and professional learning, and Dora's going to come back up and join us.
Hello again. So a group of educators from various grades and elementary schools work together to create these literacy guides for families and caregivers for grades pre-K to 6. The guides include skills students will develop throughout the school year, suggested at-home activities to support learning, and resources. These are translated into various languages and are found on our district website. We're also working on adding information on how reading is taught, the shifts in literacy instruction based on the research, and the materials used. This site is currently under construction. It is worth noting that we can't put literacy at the forefront without professional learning, And this past year, I just want to highlight some of the things that we've done so far. This past summer, a group of educators, including literacy coaches, reading specialists, and classroom teachers, worked on developing lessons for decodable text that were purchased for each elementary school building. Foundation training continued for new teachers at the grade and also new to AB. This also occurred earlier this year. We've been able to continue to partner with Melissa Orkin from Crafting Minds to support educators with understanding these shifts to reading instruction based on the research, as well as support small group instruction. Currently, she is working with grades K to 3, but we're hoping to bring her back for grades 4 to 6 next year. Literacy coaches, reading specialists, and curriculum coordinators have been part of a research practice seminar to explore structured literacy interventions. The resources compiled will support small group interventions and be shared with teachers. A literacy coach and reading specialist have also led some initial MCAS DIBELS training for grades K to 3 in their building. Literacy coaches have also led ongoing building-based professional learning across the 6 elementary schools. Professional learning will be crucial as we implement a new core program next school year.
From one of our previous or just very recent school-based MTSS professional learning, these are a couple of quotes. The yellow represent, some of the challenges, more time for independent looking at the data. So again, time is always such an important piece of this work. And having the opportunity to dive deeper to really define instruction and the intervention needed. So again, back to time and collaboration. But some of the positives, the collaborative discussion was really valuable, the productive and professional struggle working together as a team, and the ability to make choices about a protocol and to follow it and to have success with that protocol. So all of what we shared with you tonight and this evening, it takes time, it takes learning, and it takes collaboration, which is what we also hope we shared with you tonight, and we were able to demonstrate that it takes a whole team of educators at the classroom, the school, and the district working together for our students. So we'll close out with a big thank you and a big shout out to all of those individuals who help support the work every day. And if you have any other final questions, we're happy to answer those. Thank you. Amanda. Go ahead.
Does it work? It does work. And I just want to say, if we were ever going to applaud anyone, it would be our reading specialist. Just for lovely, lovely people. I love your question, Evelyn. I love it because the school committee has 2 policies on reporting student progress and student progress reports to parents and guardians. And this is a major hole here because we talked about family engagement, but we did not talk about progress reporting to families. We've had instances where parents have been happily provided iReady scores when they asked teachers. And in other instances, we've had parents ask teachers for iReady and been told, I don't know if I can share that with you, or no response at all. We don't have report cards in every school. We don't have homework in our early primary grades. We have the iReady information. We are taking gobs of data, reams of data at this point. Parents need to know. Caregivers need to know so that we can partner with you in helping our kids. So these policies were last looked at in 2014. Revising them takes work. But in addition to regular reports, parents should be notified when students' performance requires special attention. We have parents who do not know that their child is working with a reading specialist. We have parents who have learned this because a child saw a sibling in a hallway multiple times a week, pulled out they're not aware necessarily. It's not universal. Maybe in some schools they are told, but it's not universal that parents are told that their child is getting this kind of help. We love the help. We appreciate the help deeply, but we need to know. So I would encourage you to take a look at File IK, File IKAB, and see what we can already do to improve this for families so that we can partner with the schools more effectively. Thank you all again so much for your time. Thank you to the committee.
So that's really important, actually. So I'm in a school that doesn't do report cards. And I don't think I've seen either of my sons' iReady scores. So will you please address that?
Sure. So With the principals last year and literacy coordinators, specialists, and coaches, we were able to write in some iReady data guidelines around communicating with parents and caregivers, and we have a whole section that was shared out. So if it's not happening, we need to know, and we need to know where it's not happening so that our principals and our teachers can address that. But we have provided guidance at the district level, and it's in our FAQ for our educators about the expectations for communicating to parents and caregivers.
Just to add to that, when we provide the guidance at the district level, that's a technical solution to an adaptive problem. And in reality, the amount of work our educators have done to shift practice over the last several years is nothing short of monumental. And so, I want to make sure that there's an understanding that, things that happen at the district level can't happen instantly everywhere. It just doesn't, we sometimes wish it could, but it doesn't. And so, we want to know when it's not happening, not because we want it to become punitive, but because we want to be able to support consistent implementation of something. And I think that's just a really important message to keep coming back to. Our educators are working really, really hard to do this well. It's a lot of shift in practice, and that takes time. And so we want to also know, we want to help them, continue to inform families and everything else. And I know no one said it was punitive, but I just want to really stress that we don't want a punitive approach to MTSS. That is not the goal of this.
Thank you, and I want to applaud the teachers and all the educators for all the work you're doing, but I'm just trying for my own understanding that the goal is to partner with parents, correct, to do this work, like inform parents about where their kids are, because what Amanda just highlighted is, is problematic. If parents don't know where their kids are, how they're doing, and they're not partnering with the educators, it takes a village to really raise a kid, right? And so our educators should be partnering with families to do this. So I'm just trying to understand from you, Peter and Deb, that the intent is that ultimately we're gonna get to a point where parents are looped into how their kids are done, and parents are gonna be partnering with our educators to ensure that their kids are meeting the targets. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you so much for all of this and for answering that question, but I don't feel that the question was really answered, because if parents don't know that something's wrong, how are they supposed to inform you that they're not getting the information? So it seems like it should come from you first to the parents, and then you can communicate, but parents can't come to you and say what they don't know.
Yeah, I think what Deb was trying to say was that actually is supposed to be the process, that when we get the data, we share it with families. I think what we're saying is it's not consistent everywhere right now because there's so much change that it just takes time to implement that and to make sure there's a level of consistency around it.
So going forward, when iReady is done, parents will be notified with whatever the score was every time?
So we want to make sure that we also put iReady in context, right? So the fall conferences is actually one of the areas when we gave the guidance to share it along with other things, student work, classroom-based measures. It's supposed to be used as a screener, right? So it's a very high-level look to see, is there something else, as Christy was explaining earlier, is there something else we need to dig into to find? It's a one-time, really high-level overview. It may be, again, like any other screening tool, it may have been just that day, it may have been something that we do need to look further into, but we need to put it together with other information to find that out. So our guidance is to encourage folks to use it at the fall meeting, the conference, so that parents have a good understanding about what are some of the challenges and what are some of the strengths, again, celebrating those strengths that a child has. I also know that last year, all of the reading specialists came together to create one document that they share with students as families if they are seeing a student for reading support. And that is reading support, and I want to make sure I differentiate between flex block and reading support by a reading specialist from the classroom. If a reading specialist is seeing a student on an ongoing basis, that letter is sent home. If a reading specialist or any other personnel is seeing a student during flex block, which changes rapidly, like every other week. We're not sending letters home for that because it would just be too cumbersome. So it's very specific about seeing a reading specialist for a very specific reason, and we do have something district-wide.
And I just want to follow up on, so if children are meeting with reading specialists and parents aren't being notified that that's happening, is that just a accident, that this shouldn't be like a continuation problem, or do you just don't tell parents as a rule? What's the general rule for that?
The general rule is that they should be informed that they're seeing the reading specialist. And there is one district letter that goes out to all parents that's similar.
And how long has that rule been in place?
I want to say, Carrie can correct me if I'm wrong, but 2 years?
So I guess what I'm hearing here is there's a lot of concern around the table around whether or not parents are given specific information, and I wonder if there's an opportunity for us as a district to share some general information as an update on our MTSS process, similar to sort of that overview that we get right when we get the MCAS scores that say, hey, here's this new flex block, here's what you might expect in terms of things that could come home. Because I think what I'm hearing is there's a lot of concern that there may be differing levels of additional need that's identified for our student, and the parents may not get that in a timely way or may not know what is something that I will get informed about, a discrete intervention from a reading specialist versus something that I wouldn't get informed about, a tier 2 intervention in a flex block for 3 weeks. And so I think, you know, a general letter that just might say, hey, as part of our evolving process of implementing this tiered structure, here are some things that you might see from your kid's school, and it can include iReady results and notes about pullouts or what have you. I think that might help sort of calm some of the concerns and give a nice letter to just sort of say to everybody, here's a progress report on what we're doing, because I think I'm hearing Peter say also, like, we need to take a breath here. There's a lot that we're asking, there's a lot of change very quickly. 2 years ago, when these letters started going out, I think we were all still locked in our own bedrooms. So, like, I want to recognize that there's a lot of changes that have happened, and maybe we just haven't been really good at communicating back out to the families what the current state is.
So, it takes a lot to implement something, right? And it takes a while for that to stick. So do we know when we think that, because to Adam's point, it's been 2 years now, but anybody who knows implementation science, it takes a while for things to be implemented and for them to stick and to hit a stride. When do we think that we're gonna hit that stride where everybody in the district is gonna know what is happening? Every parent is gonna be aware of how their kids are being educated in our district, and then get the feedback that they need or pull in when they need. Because in my mind, we should have a timeline for when this is gonna happen. And I don't wanna put you on the spot, but I think that we should have a goal, even if it's just a goal, that it's 2 years, maybe in the next year, whatever time it is. And if we don't have that information, maybe we should come back with that, because I think people would want to know.
Yeah, I want to give that a little thought, just because I think it also might assume that there's a perfect linear progression to it, that everyone will be on the same timeline. And I think there's different amounts of information based on the different needs of students that parents may receive. I think it's a good point. I want to give it some thought. I just don't have an answer for tonight.
I'll just add, Evelyn, that timeline is also dependent on our ability to both provide adequate funds to support and policy to support. So, I mean, we're a key component of that as well.
Hello, John Peterson, 6 Jackson Drive. I just wanted to disaggregate the parent group in this discussion. Just like our students, our parents and families, exist across a spectrum and a spectrum of needs for communication. So yes, we want to reach out to families, but in order to do that effectively, that's also going to be a tiered kind of communication in order to be effective.
And that was the point I was going to make, which is I hope that we make those communications.
If I may, Madam Chair, look again at the subgroups. Look again at the subgroups that are underperforming. This can't wait.
No, you got to give me more than that. So what does that mean?
When we look at the students with disabilities on the iReady, when we look at students by race on the iReady, when we look at the students who are underperforming, that initial slide of who wasn't making the mark, those are the subgroups. When we talk about not giving progress reports to parents and not keeping parents informed of progress, and those are our subgroups, we have a problem we need to address, not on a 2-year timeline. We need to engage families now.
Amanda, it would be helpful if you reach out to us and give us some examples of where it might not be occurring so that we can actually look into that, because it's, the generality of it is hard to defend. Yeah, okay. Yeah, thank you.
And so what I was trying to say is that when we start doing that communication with families, I hope we can do that in language that that everybody understands. And what I mean by that is not just multilingual, but also, we use a lot of education speak here, and a lot of us are educators or adjacent enough that we can follow with this. But, it cannot be a letter that even says dibbles. Like, it can't be that, because not everybody gets it. And it's not fair to have to Google all the jargon to be able to read the communication. You know what I mean?
Sure. And so I think Dora earlier had alluded that we're under construction right now to create also a website so parents can have an understanding of how we're teaching reading, and to that end, to be able to really unpack what does it mean to teach letter sounds. Right, and talk about it in that way, and then what are we doing in the classroom so parents can have an understanding of what actually takes place. And I think that will be a good grounding for these other kinds of communication that needs to happen.
I just want to say thank you so much for the preparation in the presentation. I took down several questions as you were presenting, and throughout the entire presentation, you touched on all of them. So I really appreciate the work of all the educators and everyone who came to present to us this evening. It was really well prepared.
And thank y'all for staying late. Doris, thank you for coming back a second time and staying late. We see you. Yes. Have a good evening, y'all. Okay, so we are now pivoting to FY24 budget. So are we inviting Mr. Verdolino up, or is he staying in his seat, Peter?
Mr. Verdolino is always invited up. We'll both go up together. So I'll just, as Dave's getting seated, I'll just jump in to keep us moving. This is not intended to be a budget presentation, typically that you would have on a first budget presentation. Instead, what we're trying to do is give you an early preview of the budget. We're coming back in January, on January 12th. That is the first in the series of actual budget presentations that we do on an annual basis. This is just to give you a sense of the big picture of what we're dealing with for some of the challenges in the FY24 budget. So I just want to make sure the context is clear, because you're not going to get any answers out of us as to how we're solving the problem. We're just telling you what the problem is first. So Dave, do you want to talk to this one?
So here's a bar graph that looks like there's growth, right? It says state aid revenues, and the columns look to be growing, and state aid growth has been and is expected to continue to be positive, but it's small. You look in the bottom right, the growth is about 1% a year. We only get minimum aid as far as Chapter 70 increases. There's been a little bit of growth in regional transportation. Charter reimbursement, if we get more, we end up paying it back, and on the other end by way of assessment. So to support budget, so these revenues are what keeps the assessments down. We have a budget, the budget's funded by assessments, but revenues defray some of those costs to not have all of our operations funded by assessments. Well, if revenues are only going up by an average of 1% and our budget growth is going up by an average of, say, 3%, there's the need to provide additional funding from reserves and assessments. That's the tension that we face in constructing the budget. And you can read the note on the bottom as far as state revenues and where they fit into the entire budget picture. We talk about reserves often. We still have a fairly healthy reserve position. If I back the chart up a couple of years, when I first got here about 6 years ago, the bar wouldn't have gone through the floor, which the base is $1 million. So we're in a decent position. We're not in as great a position as we were pre-COVID, but there is still significant reserves, certainly not enough to consider proposing an override to fund the district's operations. And you can say, go back one more thing. I'm sorry. We are at this point at this stage in the development process planning to use $1.25 million of E&D, down from $1.5 million in FY23. This may change during budget development, but the numbers that we're going to be presenting in the next couple of slides are based on using $1.25 million. We've had a pretty stable budget rate of increase over more years than just the 3 that are presented. But you can see that in order to provide the same level of services in FY24, and there are a number of reasons beyond inflation to explain that, and as Peter said, we won't get into that today. There's a bigger increase at this point in the development process. And so to get to the target established by the school committee of 2.5%, the budget gap, if you will, between what was proposed as level service costs and that 2.5% is about $3 million. Again, note the footnote at the bottom. We're coming off a year in which over 20 positions were reduced. And the expectation is that closing the FY24 budget gap of $3 million is going to require a similar strategy of reducing positions.
Can I make a comment
Sure.
on that? Again, I just want to really reiterate, if you look at the FY23 bar here, the reason that it's coming in at that 3% rate is because we reduced 20 positions to get to a 3% increase. Okay, and I want to be clear, if we hadn't reduced those, you'd probably be looking at a 4+ overall budget. I put some highlights of some of the reasons why we're seeing such a large budget growth in the memo in the packet. But, we had a number of different factors. I think we have health insurance rates. We thought maybe initial guidance would come in at 5%. That's actually going to be 8%. Is what we're now projecting. So health insurance is certainly a major driver in a budget. We also know that the state approved a 14% increase in out-of-district special education tuitions and transportation costs. So we have to hold a relatively high number for that. We think that not all organizations will end up coming in right at the 14%. So I think there's, we're likely to see that number come down a little bit. But until we have more information, we have to have that held in the budget. We did hear some positive movement out of a conference call with DESE today that they might be looking at some pothole fillers around that 14% cost. We have no information on that yet. So again, we can't count on anything. And then we also, have had the opportunity to have some grants over the last several years and, pandemic relief aid, things like that, that have allowed us to maintain services for kids and prioritize services for kids. But some of those grants are now coming off and we can no longer rely on them as funding sources. And so we either have to discontinue to provide things or we have to look at how we're going to fund those programs. So there's really a variety of factors leading to that large gap between what we would project for level services, in other words, education as we do it today, and what we're going to be able to fund looking at a 2.5% budget target. Just to give you a summary of where we're at right now, we've been meeting bi-weekly with the budget subcommittee from school committee, and so that's been productive, and we've had good discussions around, where we're at with the big budget picture. From a school committee perspective, you have approved the overall budget timeline, you've set guidelines, and you've set increase targets for us for both the Acton assessment and for the overall budget development, so we're working toward that. We've had multiple meetings with our central office staff and senior leadership, including all of our building principals, to talk about strategies to do that. And I have been conducting, a number of different budget meetings available for any staff who are interested in learning more, providing feedback on the budget process to try and make sure we're communicating well with staff through the process and soliciting any ideas that they may have about priorities or ideas that maybe we didn't think of that we could look at. Next steps, we are going through all of the different departmental budget submissions, and we are developing those into a recommended budget. Those cost centers include personnel, health insurance, employee benefits, out-of-district tuitions, the use of circuit breaker reserves to offset any out-of-district tuitions, and then really trying to hone in on those FY24 revenue estimates. I will say from a state level perspective, we have a new administration coming in, and when the administration turns over, it's just a friendly reminder that the new governor is given 2 extra months to submit their budget proposal. So instead of seeing anything in January, it's likely to be probably the middle of March, correct, Dave?
Early March, yeah.
Early March. And so that's not going to really be helpful for our budget deliberations along the way, because we can't count on things that we don't know coming out of the governor's office. We heard a lot about the millionaire's tax. And, we've had a couple questions, can that help us in this budget? We're an entire fiscal year away from seeing any revenue if that revenue is appropriated by the legislature. So, we know the money is there for a combination of education or infrastructure projects, but it has to be appropriated based on a formula TBD, right? So we have to play a waiting game with that, although we are hopeful. And if there were any legislators that might be listening, we would certainly say, please keep us in mind. And then, we're going to have to obviously get to some suggested reductions to address the $3 million budget gap. Things, we're being very open, and we've talked about this in budget sub. We've talked about this with, in our staff meetings, but we are planning to come back to you. It will be a smaller, more efficient central office district leadership. We know that that's happening. We're looking at areas that we can make non-staffing reductions. How can we tighten other things up? Are there any other revenue sources that we might explore? We anticipate those are going to be very small in comparison to the overall budget picture. And then we just know, even with doing a lot of that, there's still going to have to be reductions in school-based staffing. We are prioritizing things that provide direct services to students and other areas within the budget guidelines that you provided us. So we're working through that now. We will have our first proposal to you on January 12th. And then that starts the school committee side of the deliberations. So happy to answer any questions on the early part of this.
Sorry. I said that I know that this is not a surprise for budget sub folk, but for those of y'all who do not have the privilege and pleasure of being on that subcommittee, do you have any questions? Y'all sure? Hi, Andrew, and then Adam.
So what would the best way for us to go after our local legislatures be to get money from the government to help us?
One of the things that I think is important is we have to really understand that the state funds education on a formula basis. And legislators can't change, individual legislators can't change the formula that's out there. Chapter 78 has gone through a major shift, and we've heard a lot about Student Opportunity Act. The challenge for us in particular is that based on the relative affluence of the community and declining enrollment, we are really held in a category called hold harmless, which provides us minimum aid per student, which by law is set at $30 per student. So with 5,000 students, that's only $150,000 a year. And when you're talking about a budget that is, over $100 million, that's not going to do much. It doesn't pay for even health insurance increases. It pays for about a third of the health insurance increase on a good day. That's one challenge, I think, our representatives and I have stayed in touch, and I know with school committee members, I think we're looking for creative ways. If we have programs in the district we're trying to fund that are kind of startup programs or specialized opportunities to look for earmarks that may be able to help with that, that is always helpful. But I also want to set expectation to the committee, like that whole Chapter 70 formula is really set in stone, and that's a challenge for the legislators as well.
The set in stone aspect of it, not to disagree, but they can change what they've put into, what they've enacted to this point. And there are movements out there to do things that would help not just Acton-Boxborough, but more than half the districts in the state who are in the same hold harmless category and only receiving minimum aid, despite the fact that the Student Opportunity Act will be in year 3 in FY24. Not to get in the weeds, but one thing that you don't even have to understand the mechanics of the formula to know that right now the state funds 41% of the foundation budget. There have been proposals filed to raise that systematically up to as high as 46 or 47% by 1% a year. That would so significantly shift the cost of the foundation budget between districts and the state that, in my opinion, that would result in a benefit to Acton-Boxborough. Is that going to happen? I don't know. The bill has been filed. There's history of it. There are progressive legislators who will likely file it again. For my money, that is the biggest thing that could benefit not just Acton-Boxborough, but a majority of the districts in the state.
Progressive bills to be filed by progressive legislators. Very interesting. Hello, Adam.
It's very progressive. I want to just sort of remind everybody, we talked about this a bit before, and a lot of what's driving our budget is the challenges that we have on the Acton side of our district. And so I just want to say that as part of our budget process, we have members of the district administration and school committee who sit on the ALG, Acton Leadership Group, which, the core of that group is to look at the financial model on how the town of Acton is going to be able to afford this within the constraints that they have. And so I just wanted to remind everybody of that, and then also sort of express my gratitude to the members of the Acton Select Board and Finance Committee who have been excellent partners in this very, very challenging year for both of us. And so, we'll continue to work on the budget, and we'll continue to work on balancing what we see as the needs for our students, but also the ability of our residents to be able to afford all of the services that they want in town, which include the schools, but also plenty of other services that the town provides to them. And then the other component I want to add here is that obviously the town of Boxborough continues to see an increase in the number of students that are coming from Boxborough and as a percentage of students in the district. So while we are working really hard to keep the budget and the increase in assessments down for both towns, because Boxborough is going to have a higher percentage of students again in the district next year, their increase in assessment is going to be higher. And so, again, it's really important to make sure that the residents of Boxborough understand that we're doing our best to keep our budget down, but Boxborough is such a wonderful place to live that more and more people with kids want to go there, and therefore they're sending more students to our district. So those are just two more reminders that I wanted to share about some of the work that the budget subcommittee is doing.
Tune in on the 12th, y'all. Tune in on the 12th. Thank you so much. Okay, and so now we are going to turn to the administrative update to the book challenge. I'm going to let y'all know how this is going to go. I believe that Peter and Deb are going to give a presentation, or they're going to talk to us. The members of the committee will have a moment to chat. And then this is a decision that has been made. I'm going to open up the floor for public comment. And I have changed my mind. We will have 15 minutes of public comment instead of 10.
All right, so thank you, Kyra. So, just to summarize the memorandum that I have in the packet, I want to just start by saying, I think it's really important when we have differences of opinion about things that we don't try to read intent into why there's a difference of opinion. I think we can make a lot of assumptions about people that way. And so, there's no effort to make an assumption why someone might challenge a book. But I think one of the things I want to recognize is, the challenge, I think, made some members of our community, particularly those in the LGBT plus part of our community, really feel more isolated and marginalized in our district. And we've heard that from staff, we've heard it from students. And so I just want to reaffirm our commitment to all of our staff and students and families who identify as LGBTQ+, because we are a safe space for all of our students, staff, and families, and we just want to make sure that we continue to make everyone feel safe in the community. And that's not reading any intent into why someone may disagree with a piece of literature, but it certainly just wants to recognize and hold the space for individuals who may feel impacted by it. We had a process in place, and I'll let Deb just say a few words about the process. But we've had a procedure and a policy in place around curriculum, and in particular reconsideration of curricular materials for a number of years now. So when we received the challenge, the first step in that is to try and resolve it informally with the principal. And if that doesn't work, then we send that to a committee of our educators to really take a look at that and try and understand if that's going to be appropriate for either our school curriculum or our school libraries to have as a resource. So we convened the team through that process. They did reaffirm that it was an appropriate piece of literature to have in our high school library, and so that was the decision of the committee, so that will stand. The way the procedure reads is once the committee makes that decision, that is the final decision on the issue, and that is not up for reconsideration for a 3-year period afterwards. So that's really where we stand on that right now. It's always tough. I think our team did a nice job really thinking through the complexities of this. We heard from families who had concerns about it. We heard from families who support that literature. So our team read through that and has reaffirmed our commitment to that piece of literature for the high school library. I just want to make sure I thank the review team. I know, for some educators, it feels like we're working in a very politicized, society right now, which doesn't, again, all it says is, our society is not agreeing on issues right now. And I think for institutions and educators, they didn't go into it to be caught in the middle of disagreement. Educators go into it to do the right thing for the students in front of them every day, and I think that's the focus of the decisions they make. But we want to also recognize that when there's disagreement, we have a responsibility to consider something and consider, the merits of any argument. And so that's what we did. And I just want to thank them for their efforts on that, because I know it's, considerable time to go through the process of reading literature, read the reviews of books, understand what's out there for other information about the books, consider perspectives from community members who may disagree with each other about it, and then to, meet enough to be able to make a determination. So thank you to the members of the committee that did that. And I also just, again, want to end by just saying, we're really committed to continuing to expand the diversity of our classroom libraries, our school libraries. This is something we've talked about for several years now and has been ongoing work of the district. We're really committed to that and to making sure that all of our students see themselves identified positively in not only the curriculum, but the resources that the school provides. So thank you. Deb, I don't know if you want to make some comments.
Sure, thank you. So as Peter shared the process that we went through as a committee to come to the conclusion, and I just want to highlight from the memo 4 aspects of our rationale. The book as a whole has a message about being true to yourself, as well as prioritizing safety, which will be valuable to any student who reads it. The theme that ran through this book is safety, and it really can be found throughout the book. This is an important book for our LGBTQIA+ students to feel and be seen, to be heard and included in our community. which also aligns with our district's belief that schools are places where they belong. Our high school students, we felt, are developmentally able to discern and think critically about the information that was presented in this book. And from our school committee procedure, where we are really charged to look at not just select passages or pages, but to look at the book or the material as a whole. And while the challenge cited isolated pages on profanity, obscenity, and sexually explicit information, we felt as a book, the whole book includes important chapters and discussions on bullying and harassment, physical and psychological safety, safe sex practices, and information about organizations and allies. And so we looked at the book on the merits of the whole book. I also want to add that the committee recommended that the junior high follow a similar procedure to determine the appropriateness of this book for students of the 7th and 8th grade range. It's first important to note that this book was purchased and added to the junior high collection by a former library media specialist at the junior high and not by our present junior high library media specialist. So we did convene another group, another committee. We followed the same procedure and recommended that the book be removed from the junior high library. Thanks.
We'll open up to committee members. Hello, Rebecca, and then Liz.
We're going first? Okay. Thank you, Peter and Deborah. I think that's great that we have this process in place so that if anything comes up, we can handle it. I did prepare a statement in general, and I brought along a sheet about effective sex education and how to keep kids safe. Knowledge is power. Kids need to be empowered to think critically, to explore, and to be themselves. Queerness is not a social contagion. It cannot be indoctrinated or taught. It is nothing to fear. Sex is not bad. It is not dangerous. It is not shameful. It is not disgusting. As long as the participants are engaging in consensual practice, there's nothing wrong with exploring your own sexuality. Kids need to be safe, and how do we keep them safe? By knowledge and communication. How does removing books help? How does that facilitate conversations with our kids? It doesn't. It does the exact opposite. Just like teaching kids silly names for their genitals makes them less safe, keeping sex ed materials away from kids makes them less safe. Kids who learn about sex and consent are actually less likely to engage in it at a young age. Kids who are taught about self-pleasure are less likely to engage in sex with a partner at a young age. We are not hearing any outrage over heterosexual scenes in books, only queer ones. I think it's clear that fear is the driving emotion behind this outrage. Not only that, but this is clearly manufactured outrage. It's not lost on me that right-wing news tells their viewers what to fear and how to take action, all in support of upholding problematic systems where women and marginalized groups are made less safe. Fear of sex is not helpful. Fearing each other is not helpful. Now, my kids go to AB schools, so I mean that we are keeping our kids safe and our schools safe. This is our community, and we keep us safe. Thank you.
So I just want to sort of state and double check, because I actually was a few minutes late to this particular meeting. I missed the beginning of it, but I just want to reiterate. So the issue that was raised with this particular book was not that it was being taught or part of any curriculum, just the fact that it existed in the library. Is that correct? Okay, so that is correct. And then the other question that I have is, and forgive my ignorance on this, my kids are very young, but do we currently have a sex education program in the high school right now?
So we do. Parents have an opt-out of sex ed, and that's per Massachusetts law. But we do have sex ed in the high school, and I think one of the things that, we talked about with respect to sex ed is that, many of the topics in this book that people found most offensive are also questions that come up from students regularly in the course of learning sex ed. It may be that, we don't look at it kind of from a heteronormative standpoint all the time in sex ed, but these questions are very similar to what is already being asked by students. the educators that teach them. And we did reach out to our health educators at the high school to make sure that was an accurate understanding. And so from the perspective of sex ed, we really didn't find that this was presenting material that was inconsistent with some of the other goals we have in sex ed. I think, you know, what it was certainly was a resource for students who may be looking for more information or information that was more specific to their situation that wasn't covered in a way that made sense to them in the course of class. We did look at some of the language, and it certainly was written in language that we would not use and our educators may not use to describe sex to students in classrooms, but it's also because it's a supplemental resource that the kids could access, and it was written in a way that was designed to relate to students, not 45-year-old educators. So that was certainly a part of the consideration that we had as well.
Excellent, but so that does make sense, but, you know, so the information is there. I just know, you know, one tiny anecdote, I won't take too much time, but the one book that was banned when I was in high school was The World According to Garp. I was not even remotely interested in the book until then. It is still my favorite book today because I started reading it out of spite.
You know, I thought about this a bit afterwards, and I took Peter's comments at the beginning of our meeting last time around, you know, looking at this with an empathetic eye. And, you know, I realized that the parents who came up and those who've expressed concern about this, that is their concern, and they hold that belief, and I want to represent that. But then I started to hear something in the language that concerned me, which was talking about our children. And, you know, I think as a parent, you are well within your rights to have concerns about your children because they're yours. But I think it's more challenging, and even so for this committee to represent what are the needs for our children and for our community. And I think when you think about the broader our versus mine, you have to be broader in terms of what's available for people. So I do want to recognize and hold that those people who have concern, that is a valid concern, and I would encourage you to continue to work with the school administration to find ways to make sure that you feel your students are well protected in the school environment. But the flip side of that is that I would like my child to have opportunities that may not be available to them in the classroom setting, but may be accessible to them in our school library.
Thanks, Kyra. So, like you had last time, brought some thoughts to mind. And in the past couple of weeks, we've had a book that's been in our schools for the last few years suddenly become viral. We've had data points coming in from all around the country and meeting attendees from Acton and Boxborough and even Concord, folks who just really wanted to huddle with us here at ABRSD tonight. Outside groups have been providing tactics and guides and support for how to make quiet the noise that's coming from this book. And in those same few weeks, we've seen a recurring vandalism in our junior high where swastikas have been placed in open view. But no one's come here tonight to talk about that. No outside groups are kicking up dust about building talking points, no coordinated messaging or supports coming in. No one is here to talk about this active symbol of hate. And why? Well, they're not equal. One is a book. It's a sweet and funny, profane and true, and I know I read it last week. It's on the shelf of a library for anyone who may need to find it to understand who they are. It's a private object. It's intended to be read and considered privately, and at its core, it's a way for the reader to better understand their identity. And the other is a symbol that's used purposely to spread anxiety and fear and hate. It's placed out in the open, viewable and visible and purposely to create a response. It's intended to be in the public and to antagonize and upset, or even worse, to recruit others who enjoy spreading this kind of message. It's used to divide and suppress and to hurt. Without context, what we heard last time, what we were sent, could be disturbing. But the book isn't intended to be prurient. It isn't meant to incite. It's insight into the world of a member of the LGBTQ+ is going to live for the rest of their lives. And as a community and as humans, we should strive to build for our neighbors, to support our friends, and to help our kids become the best versions of themselves that they can be. And this book, it does that. Yet no one is here to talk about that symbol. I'm glad the review committee came back with this and understood the book. And I just think, Lenny Kravitz saying it, let love rule. It's good advice for us. Let's focus on the good of this and not the knee-jerk reaction to find a way to try to trample down some other that we don't understand. Thanks.
I just want to say very briefly that some of the things that have been said online just seem so completely out of bounds. We are a community, we are a town, our kids all go to school together. And I just want to say that some of the most upsetting things that I've read accuse or disparage our teachers. And I just think that you really have to stop and think about it when you start accusing teachers of having agendas. I mean, nobody becomes a teacher for the fame or fortune. And the amount of oncoming that our educators and staff have taken, always, but particularly in light of COVID, there's a lot of angst about what's going on, the loss of positions last year and the potential loss of positions this year. Everybody's trying to take care of their families and do the best they can. And to be disparaged like that, it just is beyond the pale as far as I'm concerned. So everybody can have their opinions about books, and that's fine, and we're grown-ups and we can disagree. But I would just ask people to think twice before commenting negatively about all of the people who work every day to educate our students, because you won't agree with everything, but if you've been in this district for even a couple of months, you've met teachers who are just amazing and really working really, really hard. And I just ask everybody to please just dial it down and let's set an example for our kids. That's all I have to say.
I just want to ask a quick question, since Liz brought up the sex ed program at the high school. Are we including anal sex now in the curriculum?
It's talked about in regard also to preventing it, and talking about STIs. Yeah, absolutely.
So, just really briefly, I'm really pleased that the students in our high school have access to this book. All of our students are beautiful and whole humans, which means that they should each have access to information on how to be their full selves, even their sexual selves. Providing books that allow students to practice their whole humanity safely and confidently is important and appropriate for us to do as a school district. All of our students should have this opportunity, because all of our students, no matter their identity or who they love, are whole and human. We should have a high school library that affirms that. I'm grateful that this committee did a full and appropriate review and that this book will remain available for our students who might need it. It is important to reiterate, this book is not part of any curriculum. It is not in classroom libraries. It is not required reading. It's one book of thousands in our school library that is available to be read or checked out. This is not forcing. There is no agenda. This is access and availability. And if this book being available to our students means that someone will see themselves as whole and human, and they'll make safe and informed decisions when they begin their personal sexual practice, then we have done good work, because that is its purpose. Any other comments before I open it up? Raise your hand if you would like to speak to this agenda item. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Very good. Then we can keep it to 2 minutes each. For a total of, well, that brings it to 12. We will open the window to 15 minutes, but it's looking like 2 minutes each.
My name is Evie Shoemaker. I am the current president of the Common Ground GSA at ABRHS High School. And I just wanted to say thank you because within this committee and within this school district, I can tell you that every other week I have a classroom of like 20 kids and we all sit in a circle, and oftentimes we are talking about how we feel so safe in so many of our classrooms. And part of that is because we have these books in our library and because we have discussions that are like allowing us to exist. And I think that that is so valuable, and I really, really hope that people are able to see the value in those 20 people that sit with me in a classroom once every other week. We feel safe, and there's so much value in that. Even if it's just 20 people, even if it's just 100 people, even if it's just one person, there's value in that. And I love everything that we do here, and I cannot thank you enough for making us feel safe. Thank you.
I thought there were like 6 or 7 people. Anyway, I'm still Corinne, I'm still in Indian Village. Let's not pretend this is just about one book, okay? You say there's not an agenda, and yet there's a poster, at least in one classroom, that shows the list of books. I mean, clearly this teacher wanted to raise awareness about these books. An email was sent out to students, I think in September, about Banned Book Week. Someone is trying to raise awareness about this agenda. I think there is compromise here. I think it would be pretty simple to tag certain books. Maybe they're the ones that are raised through challenges, maybe they're about certain topics, whatever. And you could have parents, when they fill out their emergency thing in the fall, and yes, you can give my kid Tylenol or whatever, it could be the same thing. My kid can have unrestricted access to library materials. I think technologically, it would be pretty simple, and it would address a lot of people's concerns. Thank you.
Hi, I'm David Martin. I live in Acton. I want to thank the committee for reiterating that this book is gay. It belongs in our high school library. Frankly, I think it's a thoughtful book oriented towards teens. I really don't understand the objections. People complain that it mentioned Grindr, but it's oriented towards safety with warnings about what not to do. It also says that, quote, downloading a sex app to find a committed partner is a little like going to KFC for a healthy meal. And yes, it has a chapter on sex with bold warnings up front to skip that chapter if one is not ready. It also notes that straight sex is taught in schools. I think that's the key. People objecting at the last meeting started by saying that they weren't homophobic, but I didn't hear any complaint about straight sex books. Even generally available romance novels have amazingly explicit sex scenes, but they're usually straight sex. We cannot ban books because they are not accepted by everyone. By the way, this book and many other books, if they're not available in the high school library, are available at Acton Memorial Library. Thank you.
I haven't read this book, so I don't know this particular case, but I read The Grapes of Wrath. Sorry, I'll start with my name. Jim Carey. I live on Gusford Road here in Acton. So let's see if I can start again. I haven't read this book. No, that's all right. But I read The Grapes of Wrath before I found out that historically it's one of the most banned books in the United States. To my mind, it's one of the greatest books I've ever read. So I hope we continue to have a high bar and a thoughtful bar for determining the books should be banned, and that we lean towards inclusion of all of our children, as you said, as much as we can. I think that's becoming a value of Acton that I value a lot, which is the diversity of the town, the inclusion of the town, and the willingness to work hard to embrace more and more differences. instead of just guys like me. Thank you.
Christine Case-Bolton, Boxborough. I just want to make a couple of comments with regard to safety, and particularly internet safety. As we know, both Instagram and Facebook claim to enforce a minimum age restriction of 13. This is established by entering a birth date in the user profile. So anyway, it's reassuring to know that both Instagram and Facebook have instituted such stringent measures to prevent preteens from accessing those platforms. Secondly, and more seriously, the Grindr app is being used currently and has been used by predators to lure victims and to commit crimes including but not limited to sexual exploitation and assault, human trafficking and prostitution, and hate crimes. This is a part of a GBH News investigative series on the subject of Grindr. It's local. I've highlighted some pieces of it, that experiences of people who have been victimized, and I just wanted to leave this with you. I'm not going to read them. I just want to leave this with you for reference, because this is about safety, as you said. And this is a serious safety concern, the use of social media. Anyway, I'll leave this here.
Good evening, Alyssa Nickel. I live in Acton. I want to thank this committee, the school committee, as well as the review committee. I do want to mention that comprehensive sex education, as Rebecca alluded to, keeps our kids safer. There's decades of research backing this up. Comprehensive sex education includes the social aspects of sex education, not just the biological. It decreases intimate partner violence, it decreases STIs, HIV, teen pregnancies. So it's evidence-based that this is keeping our kids safe. When my stepdaughter was, I think, 9 years old, she and all of her friends got a Facebook account by entering a different year for their birth date. So they know how to access the things that they want to. They're also students, even though they're under 18, afforded constitutional protections, and censorship denies our students their constitutional rights. In fact, the Supreme Court stated, "Our Constitution does not permit the official suppression of ideas." The ruling affirmed the special characteristics of the school library, making it especially appropriate for the recognition of the First Amendment rights of students. So
30 seconds.
I don't feel that an option for a form that parents fill out is really in the best interest of the constitutional protection of our students. And I just want to end with a quote from Lori Hulse Anderson, who is the author of Speak, that censorship is the child of fear and the father of ignorance. Thank you.
Can I make one more comment?
My name is Wendy Vigneault-Taylor. I do not live in Acton, but I am an assistant in the classroom at ABRHS. I am also the advisor for the GSA, known as Common Ground, the club. My students are beautiful, amazing, brave people. They come in and hang out together and celebrate one another, embracing differences, embracing the things that make them the same. But not all students feel safe coming to my club. Not all students feel safe talking to their parents about what books they take out from the library. Not all students feel safe having frank conversations about the fact that they're going through puberty. They are figuring out who they are as a person. That includes their sexual health. This book is, I've read it cover to cover twice. It is wonderful in its unwillingness to shy away from what life looks like for people who are gay. Our students need this book for when they're afraid to talk to their
30
parents
seconds.
or afraid to talk to their educators. They need this book for when they're not willing to talk to their doctors. Thank you so much.
My name is Michelle Densmore. I'm an Acton resident. I'm a mom of 2 young kids, a licensed certified social worker, and a proud member of the LGBTQ community. I'm here tonight to thank the review committee for their decision to keep the book, This Book is Gay, and others like it available at the high school library. As a therapist, I deeply understand and have witnessed the devastating result of what happens when LGBTQ youth have no reflections of themselves in their home and in their community. The theory of self-psychology highlights the need for mirroring, the need to see oneself in others. Without this piece of development, anxiety is more likely to manifest and self-esteem diminishes. Keeping that in mind and bringing to light the fact that suicidal ideation rates for LGBTQ youth are more than double their heterosexual peers. It is critical that we continue to make this school district a safe and welcoming place for all. Specifically, continuing to offer the LGBTQ youth in our community access to literature that mirrors who they are and who they may be discovering themselves to be. Thank you.
Okay, I wasn't going to say anything because I got pretty angry after last time and I didn't want to, do that again.
Please introduce
But,
yourself, Molly.
I'm Molly. I'm a student representative. I'm only usually here the first meeting of every month, but, I obviously wanted to come to this one after what happened last time. But one of the most common arguments to twist people's words, the homophobic agenda, is the fact that people say, oh, gay people are predators and gay men are predators. So using that Grindr example as a predator thing is, obviously that's going to happen, but that also happens on apps like Tinder. I have watched those shows on YouTube, the Catching a Predator shows. Almost every single one of those shows starts with them using Tinder, signing up to Tinder, pretending to be a teenager, and catching the predators by finding them on Tinder. It's not just something that happens on Grindr, and I'm sure it happens on Tinder a lot more because there are a lot more members. So unless you can show me some statistics that say it happens more on Grindr, then I don't want to hear about it.
I'm good with sacred silence, y'all. Alrighty then. I think that we're all set. Thank you for your comments, everyone. Thank you for keeping it together. I really appreciate it. Y'all did very well. Thank you so much. And thank you for sticking around so long. So if you want to take a moment because you would like to leave politely, then take that second. We'll take a breather. Okay. Thank you for everybody who came. We'll take this 1-minute break, everybody. So if you want to get up and stretch, go for it.
Well, then probably works to your advantage. Exactly.
Oh my God, I am on camera. I didn't put this out.
Really appreciate what you had to say. Well stated.
I'm just gonna leave Leah reminded calendars and agendas. Put in a plug for
Hi,
next
David.
year. It was very civil. Good job, guys.
I'll note that it's after 9, so committee members, if you could come on back in the next minute, I'd be grateful, y'all. Paging all committee members. In the interest of maybe not being here until 10, though, but we're probably going to be here till 10. Everybody just needs to buckle up. Hi, what's up? Sorry, I got caught off guard. Okay, this is a meeting that's coming back together, y'all. All right, so Peter is bringing up the calendar, so now I am vamping. I guess that's what the term he used until he's ready. And then we'll let other committee members come in. This is a first read of next year's school calendar. Typically, a second read and vote are done at the next school committee meeting, which will be on January the 12th. Comments from the public are welcome before that meeting. So before that meeting, please and thank you. You ready, Peter?
Yep. All right, so thank you. Welcome back, everyone. So I wanted to just go through next year's calendar with you and highlight, a couple of changes. One, we're playing with the format a little bit this year to try and, just think about how, parents might want to access that and make it easily readable. So, we put in things like NS stands for no school, just to make it really clear what's a school day, what's not. If there's a half day that's actually a district-wide half day, notate it like that for clarity's purpose. So you'll see some formatting things. Overall, the right-hand column is much longer than the calendar. That will all get fixed once we know what the dates are, but we didn't want to spend a lot of time on formatting until we got the calendar in order. So this is a little bit of a shift from the current year, and a lot of it is due to when Labor Day falls. We have an opportunity to rethink a few things. And so what we're actually proposing in this calendar, couple things. You're going to actually see 3 teacher days before the school year starts in this proposal. We actually moved the professional day out of November on this proposal and put it before school starts. One, it allows teachers to have a little bit more time in school before kids arrive. But 2, we were really looking at what happened this year in November, where we had 2 broken up weeks almost back to back. You know, we can't do anything about Veterans Day where we have to take that day off. It's a federal holiday. Thanksgiving, it's also a federal holiday, so we're off then, and we know people are traveling and everything else. But we thought, you know, where it's not a national election and a presidential election specifically, there's an opportunity to maybe not have quite as much broken up time in the month of November. So that was one reason why we wanted to move that professional day. This also, I think, came from our principals wanting to maybe think about sliding that earlier. So wanted to recognize that. Because of that, we actually also have an opportunity to start the school year after Labor Day for the coming year and still end at a reasonable time. So what we're proposing is bring the teachers back on the 29th of August. So it would be 29, 30, and 31, right? 30 days, half September, everything. We lost the numbers in the teacher days. But, you know, bring teachers back for those 3 days, give a long weekend there, which is also that Labor Day weekend, and, you know, then start up with the Tuesday, Wednesday schedule for students based on, you know, the traditional path that we've always set, which you can see in yellow. You know, we've listed things as no school days and then listed, you know, the reasons for them in the column, just because nothing will fit on a calendar. The other thing that I am proposing in this one is to consider the day before winter vacation in December as a half day. That's another, similar to Thanksgiving, that's a really high travel day, and has not traditionally been the most productive days in school. And I think it's just an opportunity to let people, whether it's, you know, families or staff who are getting out of town, do so with a little bit of a break. So, you know, we're not impacting, you know, our ability to meet time on learning by making that change. It really is just a bit of a structural change for everyone around a vacation week. And then, you know, as we get into the rest of it, it's a pretty standard calendar. This does have us getting out on the 17th, provided there are no, you know, inclement weather days that we call. We know June 19th is a federal holiday, that's Juneteenth, so that's marked as a no school day if we got there. We have to carry 180 school days, but we also have to plan a calendar for 185 days in the event of inclement weather. So, you know, that would put us out, you can, I'm not sure it really comes out well, but it's bolded. On the 25th would be that fallback of 185th day on the calendar. So happy to take, you know, any thoughts and feedback on this. You know, you can provide me some commentary now, or, you know, if you just want to think about it and then provide commentary, please email me with thoughts on the calendar, and we can do that. I'm going to actually go back to my seat, though, before I start taking comments, so that I can write them down.
I have a self-interested question. Is graduation going to be on the 7th, regardless of when we...
Yeah, graduation, I believe it has to be the first, it can't be earlier than the first week in June.
Okay.
So I want to confirm that, but yeah, I'm pretty sure.
So we're talking about the FY24, right? 23 to 24.
Next school year.
Yep. So why is January 22, 2023 something we...
Oh, it should say 24. We'll fix that.
But that's January 22, 2024 is a Lunar New Year? I thought that's this year.
Lunar New Year is, we actually have it listed. It's, I believe, a Sunday.
But
next year.
January 22nd, 2023, that's a Lunar New Year. For the 24, I don't know, what day is it?
Let me look at it. I'll confirm the date.
Yeah, because that day is for this coming New Year.
Okay. I'll confirm Lunar New Year for the next year. For some reason, I thought it was on a Sunday when I looked it up, but I see the date listed as the coming year. What's that? Yeah, I need to look at it.
I just wanted to say thank you so much for this new format. Without a doubt, every single year I miss one of those little like boxes that circles the number, so I think this is going to make it a lot easier on my refrigerator. Thank you.
February 10th. Thank you.
So I guess my question is just going to be about childcare. That's sort of the ongoing issue. How are we coordinating with after-school, extended day, rec programs, all that stuff for the non-federal holidays? You know, like professional development days, you know, extra days that are off that parents wouldn't have off. Are we going to give people some information on where to send their kids?
Sure, yeah. Actually, the professional development days are now no longer during the school year. So that was actually one change. We took it right out of the school year altogether and put it before the start. So that would take that concern off the table. You know, the other thing, I know ComEd actually always wants to offer as many extended day programs as they can because it generates revenue for them as well. They also have to look at available staffing and the ability to get people in. So I know, you know, Erin does a great job that if she can get staff in and she can provide a program, she tries to offer it, but that doesn't mean she always can. So, but I'll work, once we set a calendar, we can start working with her around what's available. Marie, you have some history on that. I don't know if you want to comment.
Yeah, just the only no school days that are in the calendar are the cultural and religious holidays that the committee voted last year. And on most, if not all, no school days, community education offers a day camp / extended day alternative for students. There are actually quite a few kids take part in that. So those options are available. Certainly not for every single federal holiday and that kind of thing, but for as many as makes sense and we can staff.
I know that the information's usually in emails, the newsletters, you know, but I feel like we could make an effort to make it just like really obvious for people, like, hey, here are some options for where to send your kids, because that's just like a chronic thing that people are always worried about, and it always falls to moms to have to take the day off, so that's important.
I just want to also thank Peter and staff for doing a great job in redesigning that calendar. It's a lot easier on the eyes, so thank you.
I will credit Julie on that. She took it all on and she said, can I come up with something new? Are you okay with that? And I said, let's go for it. I don't know how it will be viewed, but we'll see.
Small question. Are half days considered full days for the 180-day calendar?
Say that one more time.
Are half days in the school year counted as full days in the 180 days that we need to hit?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, they are, and there's two requirements that we have to meet. We have to have 180 school days and meet a minimum hour requirement on the year. And for secondary education, it's 990 hours. For elementary, it's 900.
Okay, I got comments. First of all, I really appreciate that we're able to get all the information on one sheet. I think it's really important that we are highlighting the religious and cultural observances, and they show up on that front page. So I appreciate that. I first looked at the calendar, and the first thing I went to is the end date, and I saw, okay, the 17th, but if we have 5 days of school, we go into the last week of June, and our contract carries us to the 28th of June, and we've been in this situation before. So I was kind of concerned about, you know, if we've got more than 5 snow days and we need to go to the end of the month, we start to bump into not only contractual issues, but also summer plans. I don't see any way around that. So, you know, I'm sort of talking about my thought process, like, oh gosh, did we put in so many holidays that were now pushed out? But then you back up and you see, hey, a lot of the religious holidays and cultural holidays are on weekends, but it's because we start after Labor Day. It's the nature of the calendar. So I don't see a better way around it. What I would say is, from a formatting standpoint, I might do a better job of highlighting for our families that we could go to the 25th. So maybe put the 17th through the 25th in yellow, so that they see that as a block of time that is variable depending on what we have for snow days. Just because, you know, none of us pay attention to this, and we book summer camp or we book activities, and then, oh my gosh, it's 5 days of snow days, and now I can't get my kid to their program. So I think we should, I don't see a good way around it, but I think, you know, we have to sort of protect ourselves by put that in there. So that was my first one. The next one, and I'm curious, well, The next one I have is around the information that's on the right-hand side. I really like that it's all chronological, but then we get to the blue section, which then breaks up and breaks the chronology. And so I might say from a readability standpoint, take the blue sections of district-wide half-days, scheduled half-days, all of that, and somehow separate that from the chronology of the rest of the special events, just so that it's easier for the eye to scan. And then the last one, which is the one I'm curious to get feedback from the committee, for years and years, we've always gone down in the calendar. Left column down, and one month reads into the next, and this column goes left, right, down, left, right, down, left, right, down. And so I'm curious how people feel about that, because for me, it's really hard, because I see the end of the month, and I want to carry it down to the next month. And I'm used to seeing first half of the year, break, second half of the year. So some of my feedback is, hey, we probably don't need July in there, and is there a way to, instead of do left, right, left, right, left, right, we go down all the way one column and then flip over to the second half of the year in the other column?
I'm sure Julie would be happy to retype this.
I'm curious to see what the rest of the committee thinks about that, because I know it's a pain in the butt, but, I think about, this is a big change, but then also changing sort of the directionality that you read the calendar could be, that thing that pushes some of our families over the edge.
Half of the calendars are going to be published without listing the month, too.
Just to be clear, there is more page space to work with, right? Like what we see in the packet is that white space around is usable space.
We're going to deal with formatting after all of the dates are set. Yeah.
And so I also have a question about, I just want to make sure that, so we voted an inclusive calendar, and this is the year when, like, Diwali is not on, Lunar New Year, it might end up being on after all.
No, it's a Sunday.
It's definitely on a Sunday?
February 10th. It's a Saturday.
Oh, okay, great. So, So, it's still fully inclusive. It just, this time around, we don't have days off for those. Okay, very good. Very good. I'm good with this. So I do think that, as much as I love community ed, and I think that we should coordinate with community ed, I hope that when we hear feedback from parents about, what do I do with my kid because there's no school today, that we push some of our other local private industry to make those days available for them to make money with, a no school day activity, right? So there's plenty of, there's the kung fu schools and the karate schools and the sport camps and the gymnastic things. I don't understand why these businesses don't offer things on those days. We're going to vote this calendar in January. That means that they have a whole year to figure it out. So I hope, we're going to get the feedback, and y'all are going to at me now, and that's fine, but I feel like that there's a lot of capitalist opportunity here to entertain and keep children safe and also make money doing so. Hi, Evelyn.
Not that my opinion matters anymore, but about the school calendar, I have no kids in the school anymore. But I just wanted to say that those activities that you just mentioned, gymnastics, whatever, they all have, activities. It's just not well publicized. So I think what Rebecca is saying is, and I don't necessarily think that's our responsibility, but maybe they're listening to us tonight and they can make the effort to make it more obvious that, if there's a half day here, there's a holiday here, we have activities. Yeah, because I used to struggle with that too.
Seems like a really great thing for a PTSO to figure out and publicize. And just put stuff out there.
Sorry, I'll just add, Kyra, I do think a lot of the local businesses and activities are well aware of the school calendar and do offer things. It may be the last 2 or 3 years with COVID and the way staffing has changed, it hasn't been as available. But I think you'll see, as people are coming back to being more active, that there are a lot of things out there that I do think a lot of families are aware of, but we can think more about it.
Hi. You're going to have to step up to the mic and tell us your name and your address. Thank you so much.
Hello? Okay.
Kristen Graffio, Stony Midway, Acton. I don't see a mention of the early release Mondays that the junior high and high school have had. I wasn't sure if that's continuing or not. And to add to that, if those dates could be available sooner, that would help those other extracurricular things do things on those days as well. Thank you.
Yeah, no, great point. And yes, those dates, we're finalizing them now, but those will be on the final version of the calendar that comes back to the committee in January for approval.
Thank you. All right, now we're cool? All right, friends. Consent agenda. Items on the consent agenda do not usually require discussion and are approved with one vote unless any member would like to hold on item for discussion and a separate vote. I will read each item name, and if any member would like it held, please say hold. Members do not have to have attended a meeting to vote on the minutes. 1, approval of the ABRSC meeting minutes of 12/01/22. 2, approval of donation of $16,000 from Friends of the Acton Libraries to the ABRSD Libraries. 3, approval of Life Touch Commission check to RJ Gray Junior High School. 4, approval of donations valued over $1,000 from Middlesex Savings Bank to Proscenium Circus. Item 5, recommend to dissolve Class of 2014 and FISH student activity ledgers. Item 6, recommend to transfer FISH funds to Economics Club and Future Business Leaders of America. And item 7, approval of donation to Acton-Boxborough Regional High School softball program of batting cage and storage shed.
Move to approve with gratitude to all the donors.
Seconded.
Okay, so that was Adam and Ben. I hope that somebody is keeping count.
Can I make one quick comment on those?
Yes, you may.
All right, so obviously we have a very large donation from Friends of Acton Library, so we want to make sure we just thank them for that. The dissolving activity accounts happens after a period of inactivity for so many years, and then we transfer the money to something similar that students might be involved in, so that's what that is. And then the last one, the softball boosters have been very generous in donating, prep and site work for a batting cage for the softball program, as well as looking at a shed for storage purposes. That has been extensively vetted by our facilities staff for location, making sure the contractor was approved, everything else. So we're happy to recommend all of those.
So why don't we have a check amount on the Life Touch Commission check? It just says check. There's no number there.
It was in the packet. I want to say it was about $1,000.
Which is what it says. Oh, is that what it says?
$3,371.36.
Okay, so I think then, wait, Ginny, can you just vote on this really quick, though? Can you just say aye for, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you so much. Okay, any abstentions, objections? Okay, great, thank you so much. So all of those are approved. Thank you with gratitude to all of the donors. Okay, subcommittee and member reports. So in your packet, we've seen a memo from Adam to create a subcommittee to do a review of the SRO program. I'm going to, Adam, do you want to speak more to the memo and the creation of this subcommittee?
Sure. So following our discussion, I drafted a memo putting together a recommendation to form the subcommittee to review the school resource officer program, and the memo details out both the charge of the committee and the makeup of that subcommittee. We are looking for a pretty broad group of input, folks to sit on that subcommittee, including 3 school committee members, the superintendent of schools, 3 school-based administrators representing each level, 2 school-based staff with a preference of having at least 1 staff member from the mental health staff, 3 parents, to include one from DEI Family Advisory, 1 representing students with disabilities and/or multilingual learners, and also 2 students. We will be sending out an invitation to fill out a form for those who are interested, and I'd ask both members of the committee and the members of the public and the school community to fill that form out and send that in, and then we will try to form the committee. Well, we're asking everybody to fill out the form by the end of this year, December 31st, and then we'll put together the committee and start meeting in January. And there's a recommended motion in the package, should you wish to make it.
Liz.
A question about the input that is going to be sent out. Do we know how that would be sent out? And I'm just wondering if maybe as a secondary, we could have like a link on the school committee website to be able to go in and complete that.
For input for membership on the committee or input?
For membership on the committee, yes.
I think the plan is to send a blast out to the school committee using our standard broadcast methods to everyone in the school community, right, Peter?
Yeah, we have a survey that was created that asks people, name, what role do they play in the district, but also ask a couple of open-ended questions about what unique perspectives do they believe that they hold that would add value to a robust discussion of the topic. And then, ultimately where Adam's chairing, typically the process we would have is Adam and I would sit down and look at, the responses to that and try and select from people who are interested to come up with a good representative group from the district.
Okay.
So, but Liz asked where the links are going to live. So can links go out in the blast and maybe in the superintendent's update, and can they live on the website? That's what Liz really wanted to know.
Yeah, we're going to put this out on the superintendent's update tomorrow. So to all families.
But can there be also a link that lives on the website? So like, if I miss it or I deleted it or something, I can just go to the school committee website and also click to fill that out.
Sure.
I just want to make sure that we're transparent and reaching as many people as we can.
Yep.
Community engagement.
So, school committee members have to fill this form? No, we don't have to.
We need some way of, after the fact, having, not in this meeting right now, having members of the school committee express their interest.
Okay.
So you could email me, could fill out the form, either way. We just want to make sure that if you're interested, let us know.
And then my other question is, I missed the meeting when this was discussed. Was this when we elected Adam as chair of the committee? How did Adam become chair? I'm just curious.
So this.
I'm not opposed, I just want to know.
I hear you. So this came up about from the end of last meeting. So at the end of, so we had this long discussion, and the feedback that we got from the community was there hasn't been enough time to give feedback. And we don't have a diverse enough pool of opinions about this. So while there has been a minority call for expedience to just get rid of this, what we heard during that meeting was we didn't have enough to make a vote. And actually, because of clerical error, we couldn't make a vote anyway. And so I suggested that we create a special project to bring back some of that data, and that is going to happen. But to discern and shift through that data, to take a deeper look at the SRO subcommittee that was part of the DEI Family Advisory, and to get some more information from Sergeant Campbell. Is that his title? Officer Campbell. It is Sergeant, thank you. Because he says that there is more information available. Now we're going to make this subcommittee to get all of those things. So, because I know that there is a robust discussion out there happening in another space. But, anybody who watches that video can understand and hear loud and clear that there is a large contingent of this community that wants to actually think about this.
I totally agree, Madam Chair. I think that we're doing the right thing. I think that we need to have a robust discussion. We need to see the data. We need to understand whether we need this program or not. I think what we're doing is the right thing. I guess my question is, how did Adam become chair of this committee? Did you elect Adam? Did the committee elect Adam? Like, how did he become the chair of this? I know we had to set up, I'm not, nothing against Adam, I'm just trying to understand what process got Adam to be chair of this SRO subcommittee.
So what happened is that he raised his hand and said he wanted to do it. I suspect, Adam, that if you, if you want to think about what leadership in that subcommittee looks like, you can do that. I think that first what we need to do is populate it, and then we can have a discussion. To be clear, there was no communication within this committee after that discussion last week.
I wasn't even here, so I'm not opposed to Adam being, but I would have expected that if we were setting up a committee to talk about this, that there would have been some openness in the leadership of that committee, and that it should have been extended to the whole committee to say who wants to step up to lead this committee. I think Adam will do a fantastic job at it. I don't have a doubt about that, but I think that when we're setting up committees, just like we did in the beginning of the year, people were asked, what do you want to be part of this committee? Do you want to take a leadership role in this committee? That same courtesy should have been extended to all of the committee members for somebody else or of people to step up and say, I want to do it. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying that I have no doubt in Adam's leadership capabilities and that he'll do a fantastic job leading this. I just think that I'm sure people are thinking it, but I just want to put it out there. I think he would do a great job, but I think that in the future, if we're setting something like this up, that we should open it up to other committee members to say who wants to do this and see what the interest is around. I probably would not have stepped up, and this is not about me. I'm just saying that that would have been a good thing to do.
Okay, I accept that feedback, except to say, as I have communicated, I am a chair who's begging for quorum for just about every meeting. So when somebody raises their hand and says that they want to make something, I say yes, because right now I'm struggling to get people to come to meetings, this meeting and other ones. So I accept that feedback, and I will take it for next time, but if there are colleagues who would like to take on more leadership roles, then I hope that you will actively communicate that, because right now that's not actually what I've been experiencing.
And I understand that, and I think that it's not fair to you as the chair to always have to ask. I wouldn't want to be in that situation, and I completely empathize, but maybe there's a reason why people are feeling disengaged, and it's because of some of these things that people don't feel like they're included in the way that they want to be included. So we don't know. I'm pointing something out that I think that people are thinking and probably not saying anything about it as a committee so that we can make corrections. I completely empathize that you shouldn't be in a situation where you have to beg people or have to always be worried about quorum, and we should all step up, myself included. I just have had so many restrictions, and I apologize for that. But I think that part of the disengagement might be, I don't know, might be something like this.
Madam Chair, may I?
Adam.
I accept the feedback, Evelyn, and I think it's really well placed. I was the one at the meeting who suggested that we create the subcommittee, and so I wanted to take at least that responsibility to follow it through and put together the structure. But I think your point is well taken, and might I suggest that including myself, members of the committee who wish to serve on the committee can send their interest in their application to the chair. Ultimately, the leadership of any subcommittee is assigned by the chair, and so I will gladly step back and make space for others, because whether or not anybody wants to, that's all up to you to independently email Kyra, and I hear what you're saying. I feel Kyra's pain too. Sometimes I will act too quickly because I want to help move things along. So
I understand that, Adam, and don't take this personally.
No, I think it's great
and this is not, I don't want it to seem as though I'm challenging.
No, not at all.
Kyra's leadership in picking who should serve on the subcommittee. I'm just pointing out something. when at the end of the year, when Kyra was putting up subcommittees, she did ask who wants to be in which committee, who wants to lead what, and I can understand why she's reached the point where she's reached, because there's a lot of disengagement, and she wants to take the first person that presents. It makes total sense, but I did also want to point out that we have to be cognizant of the fact that, there's varied interest on the committee, and there may be people that want to step up, we don't know. And it's not a bad idea to ask.
I think it's an extremely valid point, which is why I will gladly step aside and let the chair and let the rest of the committee express any interest that they have in both serving in the committee as a committee member or in a leadership position. I think it's really valid feedback, and I think now would be the time to take action on that. We've not set the makeup of that subcommittee. Nothing's been decided yet. We haven't even taken the vote. So I think it's really valid feedback. I appreciate it. And so I think the recommendation now is that members of the public would fill out that form, and Kyra, as the chair, could have the opportunity to review that. Members of this committee can express their interest in serving on that committee in or out of a leadership position on that subcommittee, and Kyra can make that decision, and maybe once that committee chair is selected, they can work together as a group to evaluate and select the rest of the makeup of the committee from the community. I think that's excellent feedback. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Evelyn, for speaking to that, because I think as a new member of the committee, I've been trying to figure out, is this a me thing? Is this an us thing? Like, where are my feelings coming from? I feel a little frustrated sometimes at the process and the way that things are done, and it's also new, so, that could be part of it too. I think we're trying not to rush this process because it's so important, talking about SROs, and lots of people have big feelings about it. I know I have strong opinions about it. But in some weird way, it does feel kind of rushed, because we had, we finally got to speak to the police. They did not bring the data that we asked for, conveniently, and then said that they could bring it. So it kind of bothers me that we're now talking about bringing this to a subcommittee where it's going to be kind of hidden away, instead of continuing to talk about this in a very open way. I mean, I would happily put my hat in the ring not to lead something, because I don't know how to lead anything yet, but I would like to be part of the process, and I'm happy to help in any way with anything. There's just something, I don't know, I don't really like how this has progressed, I guess. It feels rushed. I feel like there was so much on the agenda last time that we didn't really get to say everything or really hash everything out. And I think that, really open democracy, it's a slow process to make sure everybody gets to say what they want to say and we can come to some kind of a consensus. And I really feel like moving this to a subcommittee with just a few people, it's going to feel very hidden.
So it's not hidden away when you do this. They're all open meetings with community members, which is what was asked for. We're not rushing it. We're actually going to spend months talking about this. There was a push to just get rid of it. That would have been a rushed process. What was asked for by this public was for us to take this time, which I am now trying to make infrastructure to do. Process is process. I welcome your questions about how all of this works. I know that it's hard to do this as a first-year member. And I'm happy to help with that part. Again, because I'm gonna be frustrated in public. I am a chair that is begging people to show up for meetings. Now here I am trying to make this the process that a majority of people who showed up last week, where we spent over an hour talking about this, over an hour talking about process to make this happen. And so to now hear that, what we don't want this either, when I'm trying to hold it together with help but not a lot of it. We just saw a member leave early for this meeting. Members haven't always been here. I'm doing my best. And no,
Kyra, I
no,
think
I'm
we
all
all
set.
hear- we
Actually,
all hear
Evelyn,
you.
I'm all set. I do
We
not
all
recognize
hear you that
Evelyn,
you're
I
getting
do not
frustrated.
recognize you.
No, but, no.
Evelyn, I do not
No,
recognize
Kyra, you can't say that. I'm a valid member of this committee, and it's okay for me
Evelyn,
to say.
I am not done
be
speaking.
Be patient.
No,
Be
I cannot
patient.
be patient with
No.
this. I do not think that it's
You're
fair.
not taking feedback.
I am hearing
I'm
your
pointing
feedback.
out something. I'm a valid member of this committee, and I can speak. Kyra, yes, you are chair, but you cannot silence my voice.
Okay.
Listen to me. Be patient. I understand. I just said I acknowledge your frustration. I know no chair should be in the situation you are. I personally even said I apologize that I have not been able to make means and nobody should be in that situation. There's no need for frustration. There is a need to listen. Every leader should listen and make
listening.
corrections.
I am listening
To
to
say
this
that you're
entire
frustrated
community.
is as if we're putting you on the spot and we're challenging your leadership. That is not what it is, Kyra. That is not what it is.
I hear you.
I am a member of this committee and I can say what I see that is not going correctly or I have a concern about. This is not an attack on your leadership at all, at all. I am pointing out a situation.
Cool. I accept your feedback and I'm grateful for it. I accept the feedback from this group. I will take the data and the applications from the public, and I will accept the emails from anybody who would like to be part of this committee and or lead it. I look forward to getting all of that. I don't feel attacked. I am just putting it all out there because I think that this is hard. This is a hard chair to sit in. This is a hard thing to do. Hi, Eben.
Good comments. It would be good to just, in the email or the invitation, you put out more information, say expected time commitment, and also the timeline to say when we are going to make a recommendation, right? So some of us probably will be not in the.
Go for it.
To answer your second question first, there's not necessarily a timeline for when we'll make a decision, because I think the feedback that we got was we wanted to get as much information as we could, and so I don't think it's fair, before we've assembled the committee and decided what we were going to collect and evaluate, to come back and say, you have to do all that by X. So there is no timeline. The request was that the subcommittee brings the recommendations back to the full committee for deliberation and vote. And then in terms of time commitment, it's a large committee. It's 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 members. I think that it may be difficult to get everybody there all the time, but one of the benefits of having a 14-member subcommittee is that you can have quorum with a smaller group of that, and hopefully you get the right people who can show up. But again, it'll be a balance of who's available when, and that subcommittee will have to work to figure that out. I think particularly for this, different than maybe some of our own subcommittees, because we're asking for support from members of the community, it's more important to build the right committee shape than it is to say, this is the day and time we're meeting, only sign up if you can meet this day and time.
Rebecca.
Could I suggest that we have somebody from the select board and or the finance committee also? Because I think one thing that stuck out to me in the last meeting is that the funding is really an issue, that if we didn't have the program, teachers would have to take on more and there's no more funds to give them. Would that be a possibility to rope them in?
I hear what you're saying. There, as we shared, there's no money in our budget that supports that program. And so should we decide to discontinue the program, we don't have much of a say in how the town would choose to move that forward. Should we decide to keep the program, then there's not much of a change from the town's point of view. And I'm not sure, and I'm happy to discuss, I'm happy for us to deliberate that, but I'm not sure if we want the finances from the Acton Police Department to affect some of our decision-making. Clearly, there could be a financial implication if we need to add services and supports inside our own district budget, but I don't know if it's the right makeup to have someone from the Acton police or
I think
public side.
the reason I say that is because I think that could affect people's decision-making on the committee. Is like, you can't even consider getting rid of the program if you wouldn't be able to move those supports, onto teachers' plates, because that's a lot. And I think that, at least for me, is like, wow, that's a huge issue when it comes to reimagining how these roles could be shaken up or redistributed, I guess.
But wouldn't that be more of a budget concern for the school committee than it would be for the town of Acton?
Yes, but I think at the last meeting, I had said something about, could we talk to the select board and ask about, like, how much do you guys spend funding that program? And I know the SROs said that they would need some money for the program because of private schools also. Money does seem to kind of come into play is all.
I hear what you're saying, and I think, the role that we might ask for the town of Acton and the public in general is to provide input and data about the potential outcomes of some of our decisions. So I think that's a valid point to have, that outreach. I'm not sure if it makes sense to have them as a voting member of the committee about the future decision. I guess that's where, when I put this memo together and sort of envisioned it, I thought, okay, so here's a group of people who are going to sit around the table and deliberate, but they clearly don't have all the information. So they're going to have to do outreach. They're going to have to send out surveys. They're going to have to get input from all the right people. So I think you've pointed out a good set of stakeholders that that the committee may need to reach out to.
My apologies for my gracelessness. I'm grateful for this discussion. I look forward to more feedback and for all of your applications to this committee. Evelyn, I'm sincerely sorry for my gracelessness. No worries. Community engagement. Oh, I'm sorry. Well, actually, Beth, can I take a vote? Because now I've got no chair for it. What can we do? Okay, very good. So then, would somebody like to make a motion?
I would like to motion that we vote on the creation of this subcommittee.
Seconded.
Okay, so that was Liz and that was Ben. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed? Any abstentions? Very good. Yes, that was unanimous. Thank you. Community engagement. Hello, Andrew.
The Acton-Boxborough Regional School District School Committee Community Engagement Subcommittee met on December 2nd, 2022. Updates were provided regarding policy, connections with community groups, select board, and parent, teacher, student organizations. A school committee working session is being planned for February that will align the committee on message processes, policies, and procedures. The ABR-SD-SC-CESC is also qualifying publishing platforms that will make releasing information easier. The committee recognizes that access to information about the activity of the school committee may be an addressable issue. New methods of promoting committee activities will be tested. The Acton-Boxborough Regional School District School Committee Community Engagement Subcommittee meets Fridays after each school committee meeting at approximately 10:45 in the morning. Thanks.
So we're going to table policy because Ginny is not here to present the second read on the class size guideline. So we're going to go ahead and skip that item. We're going to go ahead to statement of warrants. If somebody has it, begin to read.
Madam Chair, can I give an update on the school building committee?
My apologies. Yes, hello, Adam.
Thank you. School building committee continues to meet. While the building is occupied, there's still plenty of construction that's going on. We did meet last night. We talked in depth about some of the future parking and drop-off flows, but also there has been a bit of a delay in our ability to install the solar system. So Nexamp is the company with which we will be contracting with to install the solar system. They have to get approval from Eversource, our local electric provider, and there's been a pretty significant delay on Eversource's side in terms of approving that solar plan. What does this mean to all of us? There's some additional cost to the school building project to be able to reserve some space in our very environmentally friendly, permeable asphalt parking lot, so that we can put the footings in for the solar canopies later on. And so because of the delay from Eversource, Nexamp is delayed, and that installation of the solar canopies has since been delayed. But because this parking lot is extremely fancy, we need to protect it, and so there needs to be some work in advance to protect it so that when Eversource gives Nexamp permission and Nexamp starts doing their work, that they can go and put the bases for the canopies in without destroying the very fancy permeable parking lot. So it's the tune of about $150,000 right now. There is still adequate funds in both our contingency and what was appropriated by the towns to be able to support this, so we're not concerned from a budget overrun standpoint, but there was pretty significant discussion about that and about sort of the chain of where responsibility lies and if there's any ability to recoup some of that cash. Those things are still getting looked into. But that was the big update from the building project. The main part, though, that this affects is our ability to get the solar system installed. And as you know, once we have the solar system installed, that's when we start offsetting our electrical usage. And so the time at which the building becomes net zero energy consumption is now delayed a bit because we don't have the permission to put the panels in. That was about an hour and a half of the meeting. At that point, my computer died, so I was unable to stay for the rest of the meeting. I don't know how it ended, but that was the most important part of the update from that meeting from last night.
Thanks. If I could ask one thing, I've had some folks get in touch with me about potholes that are in the drop-off lot on the Elm Street side, which is getting worse with weather, rain, use, and whatever. And I would like the building committee, you have the opportunity to bring up what their plan is for that, as well as the safety of the pathway from the drop-off through the boardwalk bridge. I know of at least one very good 12-year-old boy that broke his ankle slipping on the path.
It's great feedback, Andrew, and it brings up a really good point, which is that neither our committee nor the building committee has a lot of say in that part of the operation of the facilities. And so I think those concerns are best brought to the principals, who continue to have regular, if not daily, communication with the construction company. And that's the best way to get something done quickly. You know, we, as the building committee, it's a larger committee than this, and, you know, we don't know about, you know, how those daily operations work, but we do know that both principals and the director of the early childhood program have regular contacts with the construction company. So I think that that's the best path to sort of figure out what's happening. If some of those things fall on our facility side, then obviously it could go through the operations department.
And just to follow up on that, Andrew, my understanding is the potholes have been filled already, based on the email that I got from a staff member thanking us for filling all the potholes. So I'm not sure, but if you were there today, we can take another look. But a random staff member emailed me and I said, thank you, I didn't know there were potholes because this is the first I'm hearing of it, but I'm glad they were filled. But we'll take a look at it.
So just wanted to confirm, this building project is not overseen, the funding is not overseen by the CIP, right? It's a separate thing. Correct. It's a, yeah.
You got my warrants?
I do.
Thank you.
Before I read the recommended motion for the warrants, I'll remind everybody that these warrants are sent out to the entire budget subcommittee in advance of checks getting sent out. The budget subcommittee does review everything and sends their approval so that checks can get sent. I would ask that all members of the budget subcommittee keep a lookout for those emails, typically coming on Thursday afternoon, and review and reply as quickly as possible so that the AP team can actually send the checks. We need 3 committee members to review and send their email consent over to that group to make sure that we do get those checks out in a timely manner. I do keep an eye on it, so I think if we get to 2, I'll start sending some harassing emails out to those members of the subcommittee. With that, I move that the school committee vote to approve the below listed warrants totaling $6,236,010.79. AP vendor warrant as follows: 23-011 dated 11/23/2022 in the amount of $1,679,121.11. 23-011A dated 12/1/2022 in the amount of $117,892.97. 23-012 dated 12/8/2022 in the amount of $984,760.65. Payroll vendor warrant as follows, 23-011 PR dated 12/1/2022 in the amount of $571,005.41. And payroll warrant as follows, P2311 dated 2/1/2022 in the amount of $2,883,230.65.
Seconded.
Ben's on fire today. All those in favor?
Aye.
No objections to that one. No abstentions? Thank you very much. That passes unanimously. Peter, would you like to highlight anything before we adjourn?
No, any FYIs are in the packet.
Have a safe and healthy, what just happened? What? We need to vote? Oh, to adjourn, yes. Have a safe and healthy and happy new year, and we need to make a motion.
I'd like to make a motion that we adjourn.
Yeah, Ben.
Seconded.
And Liz. All those in favor? Aye. Good night, y'all.